Health. America Health is a premium telehealth platform specializing in hormone optimization and preventative medicine. Are you looking to optimize your health in and out of the gym, improve recovery, sex drive, and quality of life? Have you tried speaking to your health professional about this and have gotten the cold shoulder, stereotyped, or just told it's part of getting older? You just go to americahealth.com/table talk, and you can create your own lab, or you can take labs that we've had set up for them, which are based upon the same labs that I've been doing over the last 15 years. Or you can use their guided optimization. With this, they'll put you in touch with a patient care coordinator, which is actually pretty cool because you get to sit down and speak to somebody that can understand what you're looking for from hormone optimization and the preventative medicine standpoint. After that conversation, they'll determine which labs that you should and which tests you should have done, and then from there, get the labs done. They'll review those labs with you and put you in touch with one of their hormone optimization specialists that can determine which supplementation that you should use over the counter or prescription. americahealth.com/table talk. The discount code is table talk. One of the best ways that you can support the podcast and your training is to join the crew. When you join the crew, you get an extra crew cast podcast every single month. You also get access to our Discord, which has a training Q&A with Team Elite FTS members. You get form checks. You can upload any of your training footage and have your lifts diagnosed, sometimes within minutes, by multiple people. Access to close to 30 different ebooks, training logs, and first sign up access to our weekend training retreats, train your ass off, and other events that we do. Biggest takeaways from that, though, what people enjoy the most and get the most out of is the training Q&A and the form checks, as well as the extra podcast. Hey guys, I'm back in the gym with another limited edition apparel drop. This is the new Live, Learn, Pass On shirt. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our cambered grip American cable attachment. This attachment has 4 grips and it's cambered. So when you flip it, it actually becomes 8 grips. And if you turn it upside down, there's actually 16. This is one of our most used cable attachments out in the gym. Even got that full range of motion. We got a second limited edition drop this month as well. Head over to elitefts.com, pick up the shirt, pick up the cable attachments, and we'll see you next time.
Today's episode is brought to you by elitefts.com. Founded in 1998 with the primary aim to live, learn, and pass on. Please help Elite FTS support this mission by smashing the like button, leaving a comment, sharing with a friend, and thinking of us for your training needs. If you can put it in a gym bag or load weights on it, Elite FTS has it.
What's going on? I'm Dave Tate. We are broadcasting from the middle of the Elite FTS weight room, where the underground still thrives and you're part of the crew. It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. What's up, guys? We're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Jeremy Hartman. He's a 6-time national USAPL champion and athletic strength coach. I put that in there because that's what's in your Instagram bio, and it fits you better than just strength coach or high school strength coach. The owner of Hartman Performance Training. He is a high school teacher and coach, presenter for the USAPL, Reactive Training Systems, and Swiss, and in 2023 was the USAPL Coach of the Year. The jumping off point here, just to kind of validate the coaching skills, because it's not just powerlifting, it's athletes and it's young kids. I was going to say young athletes, right? But that would be kind of a misstatement. Is one of the things that you're known for in the powerlifting circles is taking 3 girls from 0 training at all to IPF World Champions. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All in the same year as well.
Yeah.
So from 0 to hero, and I don't know of anyone that has done that. And that I'd have to think really hard. And I did try to look through, but that's not something that's easily Googleable. Yeah. But what it does is it validates your coaching skills, your training skills that you acquired through your own training and then kind of migrated over into coaching. The one thing I wasn't able to put together, or didn't put enough time to put together, how long did it take to take them from that period to the Worlds?
Yeah, it was about a 3-year period, where I had them pretty much, every single day. They're in my strength conditioning classes. They were in after school lifting, when I was their strength conditioning teacher and coach. So it was 3 years pretty much nonstop till they got to that level. And the 4th year is when they really dominated.
Now, some of your other accolades I'm going to list real quick, then we'll kind of get into your history, is 60 plus American records with your athletes.
Yep.
20 individual medal titles. So bronze, silver, gold, I assume what that is. Well, sometimes you got to ask, right? Because you get into different federations that can mean different things.
Yep.
And 8 IPF world records.
Yep.
Then when, I'm going to jump around here a little bit. When did you, because your best numbers are 733, 523, and 782 at 220. When was that?
Yeah, that was in my last couple of years of powerlifting. That was probably 2007 through 2009 when I was able to hit those numbers. 2008 specifically at the IPF World Championships in Canada. That's when I was able to hit the bronze medal in the bench press and the gold medal in the deadlift.
And you also made it to the World Games.
Yeah.
Which is, I would say, the top achievement when you're in the IPF.
Yeah, that is the highest that you can get.
Only every 4 years?
Yeah, every 4 years.
Right? All right, so with that out there, so now people know who you are, right? And then what you've done, because that kind of matters, is you started training when you were in middle school, is that right?
Yeah.
How did that come to be?
Yeah, I was out doing, playing a variety of sports, and I had a football coach that was starting a wrestling team. He had coached his older son, and he was getting ready to start his younger son. And he saw some talent in me that, he didn't see at that level. And, he invited me to start coming over and training. And one of the first things besides wrestling training was we began physical training. And it was something he had done with his son, who's a very successful Division I wrestler. And that was one of the first things I got introduced into actual, athletic strength conditioning. And it was mostly involved around wrestling, but the guy was building a tremendous base. He was a metal fabricator, so a lot of the equipment in his basement he had built. He built sleds before they were popular. He built ramps in there for us to push them on in the winter. And that was my first big introduction to, actual physical strength training.
Was wrestling the sport that you took the most serious?
Yeah, it was because of the way he had brought it to me, introduced a whole nother world, a whole nother level that you can get to with that. And it was just, I fell in love with the strength conditioning. I fell in love with the process that he was taking me through, and I just gravitated to wrestling because it was all tied up into it.
Were you wrestling before the training?
No, it was a first introduction to that. I played a variety of sports, just growing up. You name it, I played it: soccer, football, track and field, anything else I get my hands on or do, and that was part of it. And then, that led to him saying, "Hey, I think you'd be really good at this sport." Just saw me playing football, and he goes, "I'm getting a wrestling team together. I'd like for you to be on it."
So what did this look like? What did the training look like?
Yeah, it was all basement style training. What it looked like was just general conditioning, with wrestling, a lot of body weight stuff, the basic calisthenics that'll come with it. But in addition to that, he had built sleds. And when I mean built, he built them in his metal shop in Cleveland, Ohio. We were out pushing and pulling him in his backyard up his ramp. When it got too cold for the winter, he built a ramp in his basement for us. So we were pushing and pulling. We had wrestlers on there. There's a picture of me on my Instagram with, him standing on top yelling at me to push this thing up a ramp. He had thick bars that he had built for pull-ups. Dave, we had the gravity boots. We were doing upside down sit-ups. At the wrestling practice room, we had rope climbs, so we were doing those. Pull-ups and chin-ups every single day. Various wrestling calisthenics too, so I think it was all tied up in there.
Did you wrestle all the way through high school then?
Yeah, wrestle all the way through high school, middle school, through high school. And that training that he gave me, Dave, that was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I really didn't even touch a barbell until I got into high school.
Did you specialize in wrestling while you were in high school, or did you still continue with the other sports?
No, I'd fallen in love with the training so much about what it was doing for my speed, my athleticism, my strength, my confidence. That was a big part. Just the overall dedication and direction that was putting me in. I just wanted to focus on wrestling and training.
Mm-hmm. What kind of student were you at the time?
I was a pretty good student, but I got better with him because it gave me a focus, and having that mentor in your life saying, hey, you got to be more than just an athlete. You got to be more than this. You have to dedicate what you do here. You got to be good in other areas too. Mm-hmm. So it enhanced myself even more to where I didn't, want to bring home good grades, wanted to be the total part that he was telling me I should be.
Are there any conversations that you had with him during that time frame that impacted you?
Yeah.
Right? And in other words, made you want to study harder instead of just doing the normal stuff, or was it just the training corresponding over, or did he say something or push you in some way?
Yeah, it was talks every single day. He knew how to groom individuals. He'd been a coach for a while. great family man, someone you looked up to in all aspects of his life, with his business, how he ran it, how he did his family, how he helped everybody out, how he helped others out. And it was just talks every single day. We'd have topics or certain things, or if, something didn't go right at practice, he would sit there and talk to you afterwards, let you know about it, talk to you beforehand. Pull you aside, talk to you during. So I think it was just a constant thing in my mind, and that he preached over and over to me and the other wrestlers that got to be around him.
Well, it's one thing to look back on that and reflect on it. What were you thinking at the time, though? Right? Because, I'd have coaches say things to me and it's like, shut the fuck up. So it's where was your mind as those were going on? Because it can leave a perception that you're just absorbing everything that he's saying. Yeah. Which I'm going to guess is probably not true. Yeah. So where was your head during most of those times?
Well, I just saw the time that he was putting into me, and like you said, like any other coach, you have your football coaches or your ones, but he'd built such a good relationship, and we were training together all the time, that I wanted to listen to him. I wanted to hear about it. I wanted to learn what he was preaching. I wanted to, he'd give us examples. He'd make us watch videos of, Dan Gable and his training and all the Iowa wrestlers, and it was just constantly fed back, and I became part of his family. There was 4 of us at the time that were training. He had his team still, but there were 4 of us that were doing extra training with him and growing up in that basement training. And I just gravitated towards it. I wanted to hear what he had to say, and he was the most impactful. So I think a lot of what he said, I took into heart, or I thought about. And I think at that time, it was just, something that was fed back, and you're just looking up to this guy. Like, I want to be like this guy when I grow up. I want to listen to him. I want to hear what he has to say.
Were there others that were in your group with you? Yeah,
they were all very successful. He had his son and 2 other wrestlers, and everybody was very successful, with what we were doing with, the lifting part, the training part. And then as we got into high school, we got better and better, and we all became very successful on the mat.
Why did you decide to go to Bowling Green? Did you wrestle there, A? Yeah. And why did you decide to go there, B?
Yeah, I just fell in love with the training so much at the time, and you're always cutting weight for wrestling. Mm-hmm. And so you build up your strength and you'd lose it, but he would try to keep it on as much as we could during the season. And I went around, I had several scholarships available for wrestling, and I was just looking around, and I just thought it was time that I fell in love with training so much. And I had another coach who actually used to come down and train at Westside. And he had brought a couple of the UFC fighters at that time when Louis started working with those guys. And he goes, if you're not going to wrestle, he goes, you need to get into powerlifting. You're already doing all the lifts. And he goes, now we just need you to get into organizational support. He goes, you need something, to train for. He goes, I know you. He goes, I've worked with you for several years. And he goes, it's time to dive into this.
Was that still in high school?
Yeah, it was right after I, went to state my senior year. And, I was looking around and I was still training. And, the guy's name was Vic Voinovich at the time, who's the coach who's helped me later on. Mr. Gary Congen was the first coach, the middle school one that's, still a mentor in my day. But Vic said, hey, he goes, if you're not going to do this, he goes, really need to dive into powerlifting. I think you're going to be really good at it.
Did you compete that summer?
Yeah, I mean, it was probably a month afterwards. I was having trouble making my weight class there, and then I got to go up to 10 pounds more, so I was excited about that. Got to gain weight. Bombed out of my first meet. I went with another wrestling coach who didn't know anything. He was warming up with me in the parking lot with wrestling at my very first lifting meet, and didn't do well in my first meet. Bombed out, but then got hooked up with the state director in Ohio. There was another meet, the last chance qualifier, so qualified for nationals, went out to nationals, and took second place in my first nationals.
And that was through the USAPL? Is that where you came in?
Yeah, that was the organization that was just around us in the area. I didn't know any better. I was 17 years old at the time, and that's what those guys said to go to. And the nationals were in Chicago that year, which wasn't far from Cleveland. So they just, put me in, and I didn't know about the different organizations and equipment. And
well, most don't when they start.
No.
They just kind of start on whatever route they end up going through, and most will stay in that route. Yeah, which I think that a lot of lifters forget. When they're judging other lifters for the federations that they're in, they don't realize that they came into that as a teenager, and that's kind of all they've known. Yep. And that's the path that they're on, probably in a good way, right? Because had you what the fuck, then you'd have to try to figure out, where to go with that. Why Bowling Green then?
I was looking into it. I saw what he did for me, and I wanted to be either go into business or I wanted to go in education, and Bowling Green had that, and they didn't have a wrestling program. And I just thought, hey, if I'm going to go into either one of these, they're well known for it, and I can get away and focus on my training, not have to, worry about wrestling. I guess, it's time to put that in the past. I still love the sport, still, built me a tremendous person I am today, but it was just the fact that I could go out there, focus on my training, get the education degree that I wanted to go into, and, I dived full-fledged into it.
Now, when you went there, there's several roads we can go down here. So when you went there, you were part of a training crew per se. then when you got there, were you able to find a training crew?
Yeah, it took me a while to build up people because, you know, everyone wants to work out. You know, they're at college, they got all this free time, but those that I wanted to be dedicated towards, it took me probably about 2 years till I had that training crew. I had some good people my first year, but it took me about 2 years there. So I was traveling back and forth to Cleveland a little bit, especially when it came for nationals and everything. But 2 years, then I really had the guys that were with me for, you know, the majority of time after that.
And where were you training?
Yeah, we were just training in the student rec center. You know, there was no us. We tried to sneak in the athletic facilities and got kicked out of there several times. And then, yeah, so we just made our home over there, and we had certain times that we had to train, and there was no missing.
Interesting, because when I was there, there was the rec center, but it wasn't in my DNA.
Yeah.
And then there was a basement club that they had, which I just remember ATWR. I don't know if it was the building or what I was. Yeah. They had like a lifting club there that you had to earn your way into, which was good and bad, but it wasn't the rec center. And I do remember there was a time period where I wanted to train with the football team because I didn't have a car, I didn't have a vehicle, and there weren't any power lifters. So I'm trying to look for power. This is kind of why I went into bodybuilding during the time that I was in Bowling Green. And I'm trying to find that spot, and the strength coach at the time, it will come to me before this is over, but he was the strength coach at Clemson not that long ago. Crazy as fuck. Basically said, I'd love to have you here, but I can't. Yeah. Just because of the dynamics that were associated with that. So because I didn't have a car, I didn't have a transportation anywhere, so I ended up doing this bodybuilding thing. Yeah. And then somebody in that club was the manager of the same bar that you ended up working at. Yeah. Uptown, downtown. Yeah. And, hired me to be a bouncer there. Then I found out he was training Hard Body's gym in Maumee. So then he would drive me, to that gym back and forth. So that was it still wasn't powerlifting, but it was at least the group there were taking training more serious than the group because I don't want to say it was rec center mindset. Yeah. It was a little bit more serious than what that was. Yeah. But it still wasn't where I was, which is 100%. This is all I want to do. Yeah. And so him taking me back and forth kind of helped with all that, but that's what I remember last night after we were speaking. I didn't have a car most of my time there, so I'm walking all over the fucking place. Yeah. And I'm trying to gain weight and all this other stuff. And the closer I lived to the university, the worse the more I hated that. Because people are up all night drinking and all this stuff, and I'm trying to sleep, and rest because I trained at 10:30 in the morning and all this other kind of shit. So I just kept moving further and further away. And but it was interesting that you worked at the same place, which was it was an interesting time for me because at least it paid bills. It did help pay the bills. And I
gave you free food.
Free food. At first I didn't have that side with the food, so I didn't have that. So there was that, and they still have the same nights and the same owners and all the other kind of stuff. So that was kind of a fun rabbit hole to go down last night with all that. What with your training though? Because you're competing during this time. So how are you structuring your training in such a way to keep it a high enough priority, to be able to make progress, but yet you have all the college life going on? I just basically removed myself from the college life by moving further, away from that, but you're still there. Yeah. And then you're in the bar, which I just learned to hate being. I never was in bars before, and I never really drank before. No. So all it did was made me despise the whole thing even more. Yeah. Being a bouncer in there. So that was a preventable measure. Now, getting home late was an issue. Yeah. Because of all that. But how are you able to keep the focus on powerlifting, or did you do all of it?
Yeah. No, during that time, I think I did all of it, but it was just a priority list. That was my number one thing was, education and training, and that stuff always came first. So no matter what I was doing, and we trained late at night, after everybody got classes done, so there was no excuses about, if you're out late or whatever was going on. This is the time that we're training, be there, or just don't train with us. I went through a lot of people until, like I said, after the couple years of getting that crew together that was going to show up and be there and, be held accountable. So it was always late at night training. I had those people that I wanted to do. It was just on my priority list. Once that was done, then whatever else. But it was always like, that's got to be done. My nutrition's got to be done. I have to have all this stuff in place. You know, I sacrificed the average life of the, you know, the person that was there. You know, like you said, the rec center, but we put our stuff in. We stayed by the squat racks or the benches and deadlift areas, got our stuff done always. There was always training you never missed. There was no excuses, and that's just the way I kind of ran it. And during that time, you know, I was getting a lot of training from you guys, you know, with your T Nation articles and Powerlifting USA magazine and all that stuff, and then calling Louie up and making trips down here. And that was my big thing. Just I saw how serious you guys were, and it just stepped me up to a whole nother level. Like this is where I want to do. This is what I want to be at and be successful at it.
How many people were in that group when it was a serious group? Because somebody's going to graduate, they're going to leave.
Yeah.
Class schedules can change too, because even though it's at night, sometimes there's that stupid 8 o'clock class. You know, so that changes the dynamic too, especially if it's a smaller number.
Yeah. You know, I was the first one to graduate. The other ones, I probably came down to just myself and 4 other very serious ones. Other ones would jump in from time to time. They were good training partners, but not just, they couldn't be accountable all the time with everything like that. We just had our training. It was Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. You know, there are some days in between, you know, if we had to change around the schedule, like, hey, we got finals going on, or hey, we have this class till late. All right, well, we'll be there at this time. You show up at that time. And, you know, as long as we knew that and you were still serious about it, there's nothing they could do. Like, hey, we're still training. You get there when we can, or else we'd wait for them. Like, all right, it's no big deal. We'll just wait another hour. That's fine. We'll get all of us together. It's worth it.
Were there any other gyms in town at the time that you explored?
Yeah, you know, I went there and I went and looked at Toledo, and there was a Powerhouse, Jim Dave, and there was a few others. I just couldn't find any, you know, training partners or anybody during that time. Like you, I didn't have a car, so I was kind of stuck in. I got kicked out of the athletic area several times. Like, what are you doing in here? I'd sneak in and work out, and they'd kick me out. But yeah, so then we just had to, hey, this is where we're going to be at. It was a decent, you know, it was a good walk for anybody to get to, and we were just going to train there, and that was it.
Yeah, the whole car thing was the one thing that I forgot about when we were speaking last night. And then I remembered that a lot of my class schedules and how I was picking those outside of just randomly picking courses was based upon what time Bob was going to be able to pick me up to be able to go to hard buys. Like, so from 10:30 to like 1, can't take anything. Can't do it. And then in the morning, no, I got to have breakfast, you know, so nothing could start until after 1. So then that also played into what classes I was going to pick. And I didn't have a structure as far as classes I was taking. I was just taking things that I was interested in and liked, which helped, you know, it kind of played into all that until it didn't really help. And then I had to figure it all out. But that there, because I would remember, and he was very, very consistent. You know, I can remember driving one time, and it was like blizzard bad. Like, it happens, probably it doesn't happen so much now, but back then it would just be ridiculous.
There's no hills or trees, man.
And we're driving, because I forget, maybe it was 23, but it went from Bowling Green to Maumee, and it was just a straight shot, just 2-road highway, not that much. And we counted like 26 cars, you know, that were in ditches and shit. And the whole time we're like, fuck yeah, we're more serious than that motherfucker. And that motherfucker, you know, we're going to make it, you know, to the gym, you know, to be able to get there. Meanwhile, classes are canceled, so I didn't care. You know, we're cool with that. And then, you know, so things like that were what kept coming back to my memory with all that stuff there. And because for me, I ended up moving to Perrysburg, which was because most of the work I was doing was because I got out of the college bars, thank God, and then was in Deja Vu, then ended up being, you know, working in Toledo and Detroit. So it was kind of like halfway between. Then the gym was in Maumee. So the least of my priorities was school. But I still had to do it. You know, so that was I drove into Bowling Green less than I drove anywhere else. And this was, you know, my grandmother passed, so I got her old shit car. So then I had transportation. Then it's like, fuck yeah, now I can go train, you know, where I have to train and don't have to rely on somebody to take me somewhere rather than, you know, walking to the gym all the time. And it was, I don't want to sound like the old guy, but where I lived was far away from where the gym was. So it was that. Now I know why I couldn't get my weight up past 230 or whatever, because I kept trying to gain weight. And I didn't realize how much walking and bike, because it was just what I did since I was there. You don't have a car. You're just, and I stayed there year round. You know, so I didn't go home in the summers or anything like that. So it's like, fuck, I got to go to the grocery store. That was a treat. You know, so you're walking back and forth 3 times to the grocery store. For that, we didn't have phones,
Yep.
you know, Ubers or any of that kind of shit. So goddamn, the memories, the work, like the work schedule, like you would get, you were probably the same way. Cause did you have cell phones then?
They just started to come into play. Yeah.
So you get your work schedule and you have to show up.
Yeah.
You can't call.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't have a phone in my fucking apartment. Like I can't call off. I can't do anything.
Yeah.
I just have to be there.
Yeah.
Then if you're not, somebody was going to send somebody out, you know, to get and bring you back.
Yeah.
Did you work in the bar the whole time you were there?
Yeah. Yeah, I just worked in different bars. It just kind of fit my schedule better, where I could go to school during the day, train in the evenings, kind of at dinner time, and then go there, and got hooked up with the cook was a good friend of mine. The bartenders were, so I was able to eat there again. You know, they'd feed me throughout the whole night, just whatever, you know, bar food was in the back, but it was free food for me. I was able to, you know, keep my gains going. He's able to kind of work around my structure. Like, hey, I had my training, I had my dinner. All right, I got to work, you know, these, you know, whatever it was, 5 hours, 4 hours at night. You know, I'd get fed at the bar and stuff like that for free. So I was probably making money.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, way more. I should have been paying them, honestly.
Well, the other benefit for me was I could still take stimulants before I trained at night because I'm going to be up until 3 anyhow.
Yeah.
You know, or 3:30 or later. Then by that time I'd be fine.
Yeah.
You know, so I didn't have to worry about that whole aspect, which was kind of nice because then you were not falling asleep at work.
Yeah.
You know, the whole time that you were there as well.
Definitely.
And so your degree was in education.
Yeah.
And was there exercise science that was associated with it? No, it was just education.
Yeah, I'd started in exercise science, and then I talked to several strength coaches, and they said, hey, you know, at the college level, because that's what I thought I wanted to go into, they said, hey, get your degree in teaching. If you want to be at a college level, we'll still get you an internship, a GA spot. But they said, hey, the future is at the high school level, which I really hadn't heard of a full-time, you know, real high school strength conditioning coach. He's kind of had coaches who kind of ran the weight room. So I listened to those mentors, you know, talk with them. They were competitive lifters at the time, and they said go into that. So that's what I chose to go into. So I still had the coaching part, still got the exercise science, and I just had the teaching degree on top of it.
All right. So through this whole time, how many years were you there? 4 or 5?
5 years total. Yeah,
5
I switched
years.
my major a few times. Yeah.
Is that where the national champions came for yourself personally?
Yeah,
was during those years.
Yeah, that was the first year. After I took second, that left a sour taste in my mouth, and I was so close to it that first year going. And then it's only going to get harder because now you're entering, hey, there's a whole nother level. Now you're at the collegiate level, no more of this teenage stuff, you know. Here you go at this level. So then I saw that, and then it's like, you open up these doors, you see these guys from, you know, Louisiana Tech University at the time. I can't even tell you how many national champions they had won. You know, you see all these guys coming out from all these other places, and, you know, little Bowling Green. So it was just like, man, I really need to step this up even further. It's like, you and I had that conversation yesterday about, holy cow, I just lost to this guy. Look at these other guys here. It's time to get to a whole nother level here.
Well, explaining that to other people.
Yeah.
Right. You know, that's I assume at that time, were you the strongest in your crew?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So then you develop a little bit of an ego. I mean, especially being in college, you're probably a little bit more than an ego, even it's contained.
Yeah.
But, you know, around all them, you know your shit.
Yeah.
And your brain, you know your shit. And that all works great. And it works great too if you go to like a local, you know, competition.
Yeah.
You do well. So you probably win. But then when you go up that next level, that's what we were telling the kid last night.
Yeah.
You know, is there's a difference in mentality. And I don't think this is new, by the way. I think if you think back to some of the other lifters that you might have been training with, it still kind of was there too.
Yeah.
Is they can look at 2 different paths and say, well, I can go here and fuck, I can win this.
Yeah.
You know, or get this state record. I don't want to go there. You know, fuck, I'm not even going to be in the top 15.
Yeah.
You know, in that mentality where I always wanted to lean into the other one.
Yeah.
Like I want to go here.
Yeah.
Where I can chip my way up.
Yep.
You know, just get there was for me, the APF side, just getting to the nationals because you need an elite total.
Yeah.
Like just getting there wasn't easy.
Yeah.
You know, because it was based upon the old USPF elite classification. So I think 242 was 1890, 270 was like 1945 or something like that. So that wasn't easy with single ply gear that was back then. I mean,
Yeah.
And if you could do that in most local areas, you're the shit.
Yeah.
If you can do that, hell, you might even be winning best lifter in a lot of these meets.
Yep.
But then you go to that first nationals and you're like, fuck. First, you're sitting there and you don't think you belong
Yeah.
because you're just looking around. And at that time, it was like people that were in the magazines and shit like that. Then you're like, you look at, they post, you know, the paper on the, now back then it was paper, right?
Yeah.
They post the openers on the wall and you're like, fuck.
Yeah.
You're like second to last, right?
Yeah.
Like, this sucks.
Yeah.
But you get that experience, and then assuming you didn't make it the first one, you were second, so you made it through. So assuming you make it through,
Yeah.
then it's shit. Then you realize, I don't know what I was, like 8th or something like that. Like that's, first is out of reach. I mean, being realistic, like I'm not going to put that much on my total.
Yeah.
But 5th,
Yeah.
you know, then that's doable. Then when you compare that to the other guys that stay and chip away at those top 3 finishes and those reeking deek meets or whatever you want to call those.
Yeah.
The 8th place guy is the best lifter at this meet, where, you know, we kind of heard it last night. Like, I don't want to go there and get my ass kicked, but yeah, you can go here. It's, for me, it's hard to wrap my head around that mentality.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that if it can just be framed to the lifter
Yeah.
a little bit differently, then they can see where we're coming from.
Yeah.
Then they see that that's actually more competitive
Yeah.
than what the other is, especially if it's big, you know, big meets.
Yeah.
And it's, so the first year you were second, then you came back the second year, and how did that pan out?
Then I ended up winning the nationals that year, and they had what's called sub junior, so that's 19 years of age and under. So I made the sub junior world team. So that was like, we were on the US world team. I was like, holy cow, this is a whole nother, you know, I didn't know still what this was or what was going on, but I'd won the nationals for, you know, my age and class and everything. So they had sub junior 19 and under, then juniors 19 to 23. So I was on the sub junior world team, and all of a sudden, you know, I get an invite and I'm going to Poland. And I go, whoa. And I'm starting to look up as much as you can. You're finding out about these European lifters. And like you just said, you're like, whoa, I need a whole nother level to this. Like, yeah, it's great I won the US nationals, but now you're looking at guys from Ukraine, Russia, you're looking at Poland, Japan, China, all these lifters from all over there. And then you get over there and you're like, you're seeing these guys, and you always thought, like you said, you're the biggest guy over there. You're the most dedicated guy. No. You start talking to these guys about how they train, how they're dedicated, how they have national teams over there. Like, you guys have national teams? Like, I'm at the school by myself, and no, we have a national coach. And I was talking to the German powerlifting team, and they actually have like different clubs set up. Like, if you're, you know, kind of up and coming, you're here. If you're at the national, you're at the world level, and that's how they structured theirs. Talked to the coach from Norway at the time, Detmar Wolf. He explained to me how their national structure works too. So it was like, man, I went out there and I had PRs across the board, and ended up losing by 2.5 kilos, loss on my last deadlift, and the guy ended up beating me out to take 3rd. So here I was 4th place. I think that's the worst place you can finish at a world championship. Because you didn't even medal. I got some medals, you know, for individual, but here I was 2.5 kilos away from placing. I'm like, I was hoping that was the goal, was top 3. And that left probably the worst taste in my mouth ever. Because like I just said, you know, the worst place you could ever finish, especially at a meet level like that.
Well, there's that external drive.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what we were trying to explain to the kid last night, is you have this internal drive, which is what's driving him now, and most lifters too. Yeah. But when you have that now, you know, you have an enemy, even though you like the person. But now you have an enemy. Right. And when you have an enemy, that's another level, man. That's another drive.
Yes.
Like, so, and that helps take you to this next level where good training partners, yes, they can do that, but it's not the same. Right. It's not the same, because you can actually despise this guy for a whole year.
Yes. That's exactly what was happening. And 2 years.
For 2 years. Right. And make him out to be the worst person in the entire world. You know, and then realize that he's not. But then when you leave, he is again. You know, so you can use that enemy to be able to push, you know, all these things higher. When you graduated, did you continue competing?
So I continued all the way through. So, you know, I was back, let's see, so I'd won there. Like I said, took 4th, was training through the next year, made the world team back in 2005. And then you're at the junior world level there. And that was when I stepped up training to a whole nother level. I also got a coach, Sherman Ledford from Quest Nutrition. He actually was another guy. I was having trouble gaining enough weight because I'd moved up from the 198 class, and I was in the 220. And I was the lifter, said, woe is me, I can't gain weight, I'm trying all I can. Well, then you get a guy that says no. And he goes, you're not trying all you can. He goes, if you would take your nutrition as serious as your training, he goes, you're doing a great job with your training, there's no doubt. But he goes, you're only doing a good job with your eating, your nutrition. and I didn't understand what that was. And I had Caleb Williams, who's a 148 legendary at the time. I trained with him, and he brought my whole nother to another level. I mean, he tracked his training like he tracked his nutrition. He tracked his nutrition like he tracked his training. So I got put on an eating plan. And this is when I was doing like, you know, almost like the Ronnie Coleman. I was waking up in the middle of the night. I was having shakes I had to have during that time. I was eating when I first got up, but that was definitely a no-no. Every 2 or 3 hours, he was shoving food down me. You know, we had a plan that actually got me for the first time above my weight class, where I actually had cut down in 2005 to make 220. My recovery was through the roof. My lifts were more than just the 5 pounds a week going up. He also taught me how to use my single ply gear a lot better. We got that on earlier to actually learn how to use it. Because I was like you guys, you know, I just train raw all the time, and I'd put it on as we get closer to the meet and then go to the meet. But he brought me to a whole nother level with that, and that was gaining the weight, having that nutrition, again, going above and beyond, not doing a good job anymore. It's time to do a great job. You want to be back at 4th place again? You want to watch all the top 3 guys, or do you actually want to medal this year? And that was the first time that I had finished top 3 and medaled at the IPF Worlds in 2005.
All right. So during this time, you're trying to learn from everybody.
Yeah.
Right, from overseas to competitors to Caleb and all these other people.
Yeah.
Who were some of the other people that you were trying to learn from during that time period? So you mentioned Louis in there.
Yeah.
And actually a podcast I was speaking to, then Dick Hartzell. So there's a whole list of different people that are in there. So let's go through each one of them real quick and say with Caleb, it was the nutrition.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
and nutrition and just dedication, because again, you always think you're the most dedicated lifter. Caleb was a world record holder, and he was a world champion.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted. And I thought I was the most until you saw how even more dedicated he was to the other stuff he was doing all day, every day. It's like, okay, this is why I was 4th, and this is why he's a world record holder and world champion.
All right. So then when you came back, how did you change things?
Yeah, I just became even more dedicated. I'd go down to Louis a lot. You know, when you guys were at the, the one on Demarest there, the blacked out windows and stuff, right from the Dairy Mart. So I'd go down and see you guys as much as I could. I'd spend my holiday breaks down there. And actually, when Louis saw, he goes, you're staying at your friend's at Ohio State? I said, well, yeah, I'm staying on his couch. It's my fall break. I'm down here training. He goes, I'll pick you up. And he picked me up. I think he had his Cadillac at that time. And he'd take me out to breakfast and stuff, and we'd go train all weekend. And I'd come down Christmas breaks. I never took any spring breaks at all, because I was too close to nationals. Everybody, like, you guys go down to Panama. I'm staying up here. I got training. I got nationals coming up. Still had that sour taste in my mouth from losing from before. So I think it really went from Mr. Conj at the middle school to Vic Vojinovic, who had some experience training with Louis and some fighters. Marcus Marinelli, he was the first one that got me, because I was doing some shoot fighting. He was the first one that got me, like, called up Louis after you saw it. I am dedicated. Like, I am serious about this. You know, he was the first one to get me invited to go down there. And then from there, I met other lifters. Vincenello at the time, he lived in Cleveland. I didn't know that. I just came across his information, called him up. I was in his gym the next day. We were talking about mental preparation, stuff he liked to use for deadlifting, how he deadlifted. Obviously, he was built for it, but he had a lot of great insight, especially on the mental side, too, which is another side that, I didn't know how to train. And it was something he kind of put himself in trances and how he would do stuff. So it was kind of neat to hear his approach. I visited him a lot.
What did you take away from all that? Because he used to sell sublingual tapes and shit like that too. So
I didn't get that too far into it, but it was just like how he trained. I'll give you an example. We were talking about back work. We were talking about numbers and stuff. And, I was like, yeah, I can do the whole stack in my gym on lat pull downs, 250 pounds. He goes, oh, that's good. He goes, I used to do about 350 pounds for sets of 8 just for maintenance and everything. We talk about good mornings, and he would tell me how much he'd be able to do on those. We talk about rack pulls. He was a big fan of negative deadlifts, which you wouldn't read about too much. So it was just hearing how he did all that stuff, how he organized his training, and how he kind of put that together. And he put me through some mental training. I didn't go as far as, I know he's got a lot of tapes and stuff out there. Yeah. But no, I did use some of it, especially when I needed to calm myself down, because I was a lifter that was almost too hype, and I needed to bring it down so I could actually save my energy for the lifts and not, barely miss my 3rd deadlift. Or why was that so hard? It's because I already spent everything else. I was getting too hyped up. So I think that's what I took a lot away from Vince, was a whole nother level of how important his assistance work was, how important his rack pulls, and just other variations that he would do. And then obviously the mental side too, that I needed to train to be able to calm myself down to save it for the actual lift and not waste my energy in the warm-up area.
Then what about Louis?
Yeah, when I came down there, it was I was seeing, he brought me down the first time. He said, you just need to watch and help out. So I was watching Mike Rosaria and Chuck. They were all squatting at the time, and I was switching boxes. And then he let me come in the second group with Sizemore and Fred Bolt and some of those lighter weight guys and the girls. He goes, you go train with them. He didn't stay with me till the first couple times. I would sit there and ask him and bug him for help afterwards, and he would help me out. Then it was probably the 5th time when I pulled 700 in front of him. That's when he was like, okay. And I was coming down. I think when I spent my fall break down there, my Christmas break. He goes, all right, this kid's serious about it. And then he invited me to come in on his off days, and we did workouts, just him and I together down there. And he was telling me about all the powerlifters. He was talking about mistakes in the past, which was good.
Yeah.
My training, what he saw as flaws already in that. And he just started to take a, less special interest in me from that point.
This was on Demhurst?
Yeah.
Did any of us give a fuck about you at all?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
No, not at all. No.
Yeah.
A couple guys I would ask George a little bit when he was down there. I talked to Chuck a little bit. And as you guys saw, like I was frequently down there. I would be able to at least ask questions. You guys would say, talk to me a little bit or give me some insight about some stuff. But yeah, it was mostly him that I would kind of, hey.
Well, it was always visitors were kind of always weird.
Yep.
Right. Because, we started at a certain time, we'd fuck around. We were there. So we'd started at a certain time. So we'd fuck around a little bit. But then when it started.
Yep.
And then it was in that role until it was done.
Yeah.
And then, whoever was in there was just kind of like in the way.
Yep.
It's just get this shit and then done. And then, if some of us had to go back to work or whatever, it was just kind of like in and out.
Yeah.
So a visitor come in, if they just came once, they wouldn't really get, what was going on. And, we probably were assholes at the same time, but we, as Louis would say, we become different people when we walk through the door.
Yep.
So a lot of these people are only seeing the people that we become when we walk through that door.
Yeah.
Unless you go out to lunch or you see them later, then it's, a different person than what was in there.
Yeah.
But those Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that was like Louis' lat day, or Vogelpool would do like a zillion sets to train lats all the time.
Yeah.
So those other kind of days were in there. But what was your impression? Because you're in,
yeah,
you're training in a rec center,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But then you go into that. So what was the first impression? The first session that you actually saw everybody training?
Yeah, I freaking loved it. I loved how they were completely focused. There's no bullshitting around during that time. Everybody had a role, which I saw. It's like how to organize this when you had guys going through. Mm-hmm. Certain guys had to change the boxes. Certain guys had to change the weight. Certain guys had to run the monolift. Certain guys were going. It was like, you're up now. Like, hey, get ready. Like, you're taking too long of a rest break. Your ass is up. So it was just like, man, I got to see this. I'm like, okay, I see how these guys are running this. So with my crew, I can come back. This is how we need to focus this, get through this workout with everything. And they were done. Some guys would be together. Some guys would go off and, do whatever assistance work. There's really no BSing around. I came in there when those guys were training everything, and they would talk about training at breakfast with everything. I just kind of sit there and just kind of absorb it. But I guess I saw the mental focus again. This is how these guys train. I saw how these guys were organized, set up in that position, and how they just, like you said, with visitors, hey, it's just another person. Hey, as long as you stay out of the way, that's what Louis told me. You just watch with everything. And it was just, I loved it. I love the intensity. I love the focus. I love the drive. And I kept bringing that back every time. Hey, this is what we're doing next. To my crew, hey, this is what we're going on next. Hey, this is how we're going to train this.
Were you able to replicate to a degree?
Oh yeah, to a degree.
Yeah.
I mean, we stayed in our corner in the rec center, and that's the way I ran it. Everybody knew during that time, like, we'd warm up, do our thing, and we would stay over there, and people would leave us alone. Every now and then we'd have somebody come up, if we were using chalk or too loud or something like that, or hitting bars. The rec center guy, if you come over, 150-pound exercise science kid, hey, can you keep it down, or can you do this? And we'd be respectful. Yeah. All right, let's keep training.
What were your takeaways then? Because while this is all going on, you're still kind of building your own training philosophy behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So what were your takeaways from Louis that you were able to implement into what you were doing?
Yeah, I was using too light of weights on my dynamic day. I needed to train heavier with that stuff. Overall, I needed to get after it. He showed me the work of assistance work. He was, during that time, I was pulling sumo. He goes, hey, with your wrestling background, he goes, your back is too strong. He goes, believe it or not, he goes, your hips and hamstrings need to develop more. He goes, you're going to be a better conventional puller. So he had me pulling conventional, and I think I pulled a PR right in front of him. Again, this is like the fifth time I was down there. I pulled it right in front of him, and he goes, I told you. He goes, that's what you need to work on. Then he gave me a list of stuff I needed to go back and work on. And I would go back and work on that stuff. And then he brought me about, I'll give you an example, Dave. You had the 4 main training days. He goes, you need to go on your off days. He was talking to me about ab work. And I know that was something that you had wrote a lot about that you needed to do. So that was like my off days. He goes, you're just doing a few sets at the end. He goes, you need to actually train them like the rest you train your body. So I'd go in on my so-called off days, and that's all I'd work out. I was pick out 2 heavy ab exercises, go heavy on those. He told me don't be above, 45 minutes to the gym. He goes, you should be warmed up, get your stuff in, and get out on your off days. And so I'd go in, I would hit that stuff hard, and that made a tremendous stride, especially in my deadlift, but it's also helped my squat and even my bench press too.
How were you able to navigate this? Because now you're in the USAPL,
Yeah.
right? And this is like APF Supreme,
Yeah.
you know, or IPA or whatever it was at that period of time.
Yeah.
And you know, the narrative wasn't online, right? Because that really wasn't a thing, but there was still that narrative. So if people knew that you were learning from Louis, were you catching shit because you were spending time training with Louis?
Not really. There was a lot of USAPL guys that were going down, and everybody was reading Powerlifting USA, so that was always in there about you know, how they should do stuff. And there were guys like all the USAPL guys I was training with at the time, who were high level guys too. They were all doing speed work. They were doing, you know, max effort work. They were doing variations of their own stuff along with that, because that's what everybody was training with. So here I'm around all the USAPL guys at the gym, is King's Gym in Bedford, Ohio.
Yeah.
And all these guys were doing some variation of that, you know, the dynamic work, the max effort work, but with their own kind of twists and everything. So I didn't really ever see it was a thing. Now, when I got competing at the collegiate level, you saw guys like who were from Texas, where it's powerlifting is heavily built there, where Louisiana is. They were doing a lot more, you know, basic linear periodization, a lot more of the actual competition lifts themselves. So you saw them training that more, not so much of the board presses or the good mornings or certain exercises, but also saw that as a lack. They're like, oh, my deadlift's not moving. I'm like, what are you doing to strengthen? Oh, I just deadlift more. Like, you got to do something else besides that. Oh, I just squat more, or I'm increasing my frequency. And I saw that work with some people. But then I saw a lot of people where, you know, it wasn't, they would be asking me about stuff. And I'm like, well, I do this and I do this. And I found this works out for me here. And the board presses, close grip was really helping me out. So I don't think it was ever really a problem. I think at the college level, since most of those guys had grown up with linear periodization and putting gear on, you know, single ply equipment going to the meet, it was a little bit different on there. The world teams, though, that was something that was eye-opening, because I hear a lot about the conjugate system in Russian training. Then when I talk with the Russian national team, they were almost training like Olympic lifters for powerlifting. So I saw a lot of high volume, squat multiple times a week, benching multiple times. A lot of their philosophy was almost the same. Build up to where you can bench more, and then you'll bench more.
Yeah. So I see where this is now on a timeline scale, where the high frequency training hadn't at that point really started to infiltrate the IPF outside of some of the foreign lifters, Chico type of lifters.
Yeah.
Right. So it wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if we bump forward a decade, you know, then it changed, right? Because I get it now. It makes sense, because it was linear conjugate, and then we'll just call the third option just like working up heavy. Yeah. Which was well, it worked. I mean, people still do that now. Way more people than I actually thought. Yeah. But just fucking work up, and it feels good, take it. If it don't. Yeah. You know, that was, I don't even know how to explain that training philosophy. Yeah. Maybe like just complete RPE based on how you feel. I don't know. Yeah. But it was very popular back then. Yeah. You know, it's not as popular now, but it's still utilized. Yeah. And I think you know, we fast forward, then the high frequency came in, and that, I assume that's probably where it came from. Yeah. You know, Chico was probably the first real adoption. What's the word I'm looking for? Adoption of, when it comes into something, I can't think of the word. Yeah. And then people started to embrace that, and it became more popular there. Then there started to become iterations, you know, of that through different coaches over a period of time. Yeah. And we can't say it didn't work, right? Because it does. You know, I'd say there's probably more doing that now, almost across the board. Absolutely, yeah. Than anything else. You know, so that's kind of been supreme. Makes you wonder 10 years from now, you know, because it all goes in cycles. Yep. You know, and I'm starting to see, you know, just the basic linear starting to resurface. Yeah. You know, the interesting thing to follow with this will be for how long, right? Because HIIT training started to resurface sometimes earlier this year, but then it died quick. Yeah. You know, it just started to bubble up, and then with more education and more people who are knowledgeable, I don't think these method-based trends, that's what I would call it. Yeah. You know, just one training method built into a training program. I don't think they're going to last long as they used to. Yeah. Right. Because you used to, you know, like 3 or 4 years, like, okay, now we're in the high volume phase. Yeah. This is going to run. And then it was, okay, when this is over, get ready, because here's going to come the low volume, high intensity phase. Yeah. And in the bodying world, it was really distinct and clear to kind of see. And you could always, the people that were in the monetizing side of the whole thing would see this right about when it's going to trickle.
Yeah.
And here's their new program.
Yeah.
And then here's that one.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, no, wait a minute. 2 years ago, you know,
you're just preaching about
it
this.
was just the opposite thing.
Yeah.
But there's the people that jump on trends, and then there's people that will kind of like lean into them and then pull them back and to help create their own philosophy of training.
Yep.
Whereas what I've been trying to preach my entire time in business is that,
Yeah.
you know, everybody
Absolutely.
should be working on trying to develop their own philosophy of training. Then they can manipulate the variables based upon clients and so forth.
Yep.
But to do that, you kind of have to tap into each one of these things, you know, and learn what you can, disregard what doesn't work for you or your clients, and move on to the next one. And then after a certain period of time, you can start to spot.
Yeah.
This is method based, you know, it's an intensification method that's just being used as a program. Cool. Get it. Don't need to spend a lot of time there.
Yeah.
You know, here's this. And, oh, this looks like conjugate, but it's running on a 10-day cycle instead of a 7-day cycle. And so it's still that.
Yeah.
And so you got that conjugate side kind of covered. The linear side kind of comes with all of it, right?
Yeah.
I don't think you can really understand. Everybody should learn linear to begin with.
Absolutely. 100%.
Right? Because even that's blocked. If you really break it down, you got 8s for a while, then you go to 5s, then you go to 3, you know, so it's all kind of the same, but it's easy to learn.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to manipulate outside of high level beginner. It gets a little tricky.
Yeah.
And then you got to look into the others. Conjugate for some people becomes too big of a leap.
Yeah.
Because there's too many auto-regulated factors or regulated factors, where I think that's where the high frequency kind of comes in.
Yeah.
And it may even come in now before the linear, which I probably would say it's a good thing. More technical base, you know, the more frequent loading of all that. So as we move through your timeline here, at what point did you decide? Well, you were coaching people the whole time, so let's put that out.
Always,
right?
yeah. It was always, yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that's something that gets mistaken, because somewhere online I got how to rank your powerlifting coach, right? And there's different variables, like what have they personally done?
Yeah.
Who have they trained to be better than than they were? Right now, that can be weird.
Yeah.
Right. If you're Ed Cohn, you know what I'm saying? It can be weird.
Yeah.
But to me, a good coach is going to be able to take people to a level further than what they were.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of coaches out there that can definitely get people better just to the point that they were. And sometimes I wonder if their own ego doesn't want somebody to be better than they are, because they still want to be chief.
Yeah.
You know, in the pack.
see it, yeah.
You know, that's in there. And then who did they mentor under?
Yeah.
You know, then I got in there, who did they train with?
Yeah.
You know, because that, again, is like learning from different people. Because if you're training with people and you're in a group of 4 people and 2 other ones also are on this deep dive, they want to learn more and more and more. So you're learning everything that you can from the group of people you're talking to. They're talking to other people. And then as you're speaking with each other, you're like, man, that's fucking awesome. But it's kind of, you know, he said the same thing as he said. You start to figure that all out. And as you click through all these different things, then you end up with a ranking system, you know, that will tell you if you're a shitty coach or a good coach. And, you know, it's a way to kind of rank all that. And years of experience are in there as well. You know, how long have they been doing that? And so you're kind of going through all this. But I make this point because when I say, who did you train with, right? You can train with a group of national and world caliber lifters for a decade, and you're still going to be a better coach than a lot of other people, just because of the environment that you're in. Yeah. Unless everybody there is training in their own combo lift rack with headphones on, doing their own thing. Yeah. Forget about that. Yeah. But that happens now. I know. But then that wasn't the case, right? Because I mean, you were in Westside. Louis like, look at this, look at this. Every one of us, there's 9 sets of eyes on every single rep of every single lift, trying to find what's wrong. No. Never looking for what was good. Never. No. Where that was that environment where a lot of people couldn't handle that. But it could, I suppose, you know, a better environment would be a mix of both.
Yeah.
You know, just to build people up instead of completely tearing them down. But for us, it was like you were saying, when you compete against somebody and get beat, you know, that was a bigger driver for us at that time than Louis saying, hey, that was good work. Yeah. It's like, fuck off. Yeah. You know, that didn't do anything, you know.
Well, 2005, when I finally, you know, at least medaled, got on the award stand, I remember, you know, calling Louis up. I said, hey, thanks for everything. Yeah, we placed out there, and there was silence. There was no good job there. And I took him like, I'll see you Saturday. He goes, okay. And that was it. There was no good job. Yeah, there's no, okay, like, great. There was nothing. There was just complete silence. It's like, hey, you know, top 3, man, you know, we're going to win worlds next. There was just.
I was there 14 years. I was there 14 years. And I had 3 compliments. Yeah. You know, that were training based. Okay. You know, one was a floor press PR. I mean, and it was, this one I remember because there was a big takeaway from it. It was like a 30-pound floor press PR, where that was usually you're chipping things. Yeah. Normally that doesn't happen. Yeah. And I remember him saying, you know, good job or whatever in Louis' way, you know, being able to say it. But then he went on to say, you're done. You know, don't do anything else. And I was so fucking confused. Yeah. Like, why? Like, why not? No. Like, there's nothing else you're going to do today that's going to put you any further ahead than what you currently already are. Yeah. You're right where you need to be, even a little ahead. Okay. You're done. I'm like, okay. I mean, there'd be other times that you'd be done because you just looked like horse shit. Yeah. You know, you're just burned out. And then one of them was after one of my squats in a meet, and it was a solid, it was good. It was a good squat. Yeah. Then the other one was kind of like a backhanded compliment. It was when I squatted 870, technique never broke down, and it took forever to come up. Okay. Grinder all the way through. It was bad. I mean, it was, well, yeah, I love the grind more than anything. Yeah. That's why I still do the dumb shit that I do out here now, is that squat grind is something that is, I just can't let go of. Yeah. But that I liked, but I was so fucking confused because we were driving back from York and did you ever drive with Louis?
No, just when he picked me up for breakfast and stuff, that was about it. I never like took trips or anything like that with him. But I was in my own world.
At least like a half hour. Like
yeah, he picked me up from a house, say about 20 minutes or so. Yeah.
He used to have this little trooper, and when he go on to the interstate, you know, coming off the off ramp, fucker would be on 2 wheels, and he was terrible. Yeah. A terrible driver, and I just leaned into it, just tried to make him worse. But anyhow,
I think it was so early in the morning when he picked me up. I was yeah.
But as we were driving home, you know, he's telling me that was, you know, a good lift, good grind, all the other kind of stuff. So it was kind of a backhanded compliment. And my point to him was, what do we fucking do now? Right? Because nothing technically went wrong. Yeah. So the best thing that can happen to a miss is something technically went wrong. Yeah. Because you can fix that, pick up more weight. And now in my head, I'm like, I have to get stronger now. Yeah. And that at that level, when you've been doing it for as long as you've been doing it for a long time, that's a shitty thing to have to wrap your head around. You know, beginners, intermediates don't get what this is. Yeah. This is like, son of a bitch, it's hard enough just to get back to where you were. Yeah. Right? Now, I have to figure out how to actually get stronger. And the compliment came when he said, you know, you'll figure it out. And I'm like, the fuck you mean? I'm going to figure it out. Yeah. Like, you need to tell me like what the fuck, you know, what the fuck to do. But and we did, but that was, each one of these I distinctly remember, but they all had some kind of lesson, you know, that was associated with it, which he was kind of masterful mind fucking people. Okay. But then on those types of things, you'd have those little lessons in there to where I didn't feel as bad at that point. Yeah. Because it was a mind fuck. I don't know if you've ever been in that position, but it's a mind fuck. Yeah. Because you're going
something specific. You wanted to answer, like you wanted to know what.
Yeah. Well, and you're going back through all your training and it was all good. Like everything was good. Everything was good. There's really nothing to improve on. Yeah. And I'm like, fuck. No. Like, this sucks, right? And but just knowing that it would be over, and it did, you know, it was overcome, and thank God for chains coming into the program, because that that took it over psychologically or whatever it was. It bled into it.
Yeah.
So as you're going through all this, a lot of it's selfish, right? You just want to get stronger on your own.
100%. Yeah.
But to get back to my original point, you learn how to coach other people when you have these training partners because you care about how they do.
Yeah.
You know, if the bar path isn't right, you're trying to correct that. If something looks fucked up mechanically, you're trying to correct. It's hard not to.
Yeah.
Unless you have headphones on and you're training a different combo rack and you're just not paying
Yeah.
attention and you're on your phone in between sets, and you can't. But in the right environment, you're going to see that. You're also going to see in the right environment what lifters do between sets.
Yeah.
Because on Instagram, all you now see, or you don't even see a walkout, by the way, you just see the lift.
Yeah.
So you're actually missing, you know, a big, if you have to walk it out, you're missing a vital part.
Yeah.
In my opinion, maybe the most important part of the entire lift. But you see the behaviors and the habits. So you see they're not like in beast mode that whole time.
No.
Dynamic work maybe, you know, but then after that, even when you were at Westside, the attitude changes. It dials back.
Yeah.
After that, it dials, not all the way, but it dials back. And then there's a little more fucking around. Then when you get to the stupid accessories, then it's more fucking around.
Yeah.
But you don't see that unless you're in it.
No.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that ends up being a more effective coach.
No.
Because then you know those things. You know the things like sometimes it's lifter just, well, Westside you couldn't, but if it's a lifter, just sit the fuck down. Right. And we had people at Westside that probably needed to sit the fuck down, you know, between sets. But other people don't sit the fuck down. You know, so you figure this out as you go through that. With all these different influences kind of bleeding into your training philosophy at that time.
Yeah.
And you coaching these other people, there became a point in your timeline to where you were gaining more satisfaction from the coaching than the competing. Would that be safe to say?
Yeah, I think, you know, after I'd done that, you know, got out of the college level, you know, my first year in the men's open, took second. Here I was undefeated for how many, you know, 5 years in a row, undefeated. Took second, locked to world bronze medals from the IPF at that time. And, you know, just, you know, it's one of those things like, man, well, now, no more age groups, no more of this division crap. You know, it's literally the men's open. Who's really going to walk away with the national title or who's not? And then the next year that guy moved out, but then I had another 2 guys drop down to the weight class because like, oh, Jason Beck's out, you know, all right, this guy's in, well, Jeremy's in. So now all of a sudden it was even harder than the year before because I got 4 guys who were all national champions in there going head to head. And, you know, it's going to come down to the last deadlift, which it did. And, you know, I was lucky at the time when I was training and strength coaching at the high school level, I was working out with Gabe Daniels.
Gabe I remember Gabe. He used to come down too.
Yeah.
Strong as fuck, man.
Yeah. One of the best deadlifts. I mean, back then an 800-pound deadlift, you know, was unheard of. That was legit. So I worked out with Gabe in Fort Wayne, you know, and then he brought me to a whole nother level too, because that was the first guy year round that I got to train with that was stronger than me on everything. The only time I could beat him was maybe the last 2 or 3 weeks before meet when I was peaking out. I could get him on 1 or 2 things, and that would piss him off for, you know, for forever.
Oh, I can see that, yeah.
Where he'd, you know, just torture me after the meet when I'd come back. But that was the first time, and then, you know, he was a big part of that because it was every single time that guy was stronger and everything. And, you know, he'd get pissed off because I had to take weights off for dynamic days and stuff. You know, max effort, he'd be like, you know, he'd push me even more. Hey, you didn't get yours. You got to do some down sets. That's not good enough for the day. And it was the first time for 4 years that I had somebody every single day that was just simply stronger than me in everything until maybe, you know, I was peaking out for a meet. I could get him on a couple of things. That was about it. But then, you know, made the world team in 2008, came down to my last deadlift, tied the guy. We actually ended up skipping my second deadlift day. We actually took a 90-pound jump from my first to my third. Won, tied him. Is total, but I won on body weight.
Did you skip it to see where the?
Yeah, because I already
as a strategy.
Yeah, actually, my coaches came up to me. I trusted my coach at the time, and they said, "Listen, like, you came here to win. We came here to win. There's no point in taking the second.
Yeah,
we need to see what he's going to do. You're going to have the higher pull to begin, you know, to end on. So that there's no point in doing it. I just trusted them. You're so focused at the meet. Okay, yeah. I had these guys. They've never, you know, done anything wrong. I didn't have to question them. I didn't have to go look at the teleprompter and see the board or do all. I just trusted them. So I didn't know what they put on the bar, and they ended up taking like a 90-pound jump on there from my first to my third. We skipped my second, And had they not done that, I don't think I would have had enough to pull on that last one, because it was a 100% max. I remember talking to a couple guys in the crowd. They go, we started to walk away. We didn't know if you're going to keep grinding or finishing that lift. Ended up finishing the lift, beat Nick Taluki, who was one of Brad Gillingham's guys at the time. Like I said, tied him on the total, won on body weight, won the national title, went to IPF Worlds. That's when we kicked training in even harder. The goal was, hey, you never know if you're going to have another run at this or not, the men's open. So we talked about my goals. My goals was to medal as much as we could, maximize the lifts, and I always wanted to be the best at one thing. So squat went okay. The Europeans are just dominant in squat. That was, I missed a lift that I needed to hit. That was my fault. Came back in the benches. My coach, we stuck with the plan. It was the medal. So we ended up getting a bronze medal, bench 523 at that meet. And then, I was the top 3 at that meet was out of placing. So he goes, hey, we're going for the gold medal at the time. And that was when I pulled my 782, at that 218 body weight. From there, then, they have a qualification from the IPF Worlds to go to the World Games, where you represent the sport, you represent, your country, all that kind of wrapped up into one thing, where everybody's a, world champion, world placer. Now you're really going against the best in a body weight formula out there. So that's where that was kind of like my Olympic team. That was my best you could hit at that level. That was my gold medal I finally got, for IPF Worlds from the deadlift. I think that was kind of that. And by that time, Dave, I'd started the high school strength coaching, and I started coaching others. And I just kind of think that I hit that level where, I tried to come back a few more times, but, I just couldn't let that go. But it was just like that other stuff started taking over with the coaching and everything. So I went down that hole from there.
What was the first strength coaching position that you had straight out of college?
Yeah. I'd done some volunteer work and everything, at the university level and all that, build up my resume. But my first one was at Fort Wayne Carroll High School. They threw that from the ground up, like, hey, you're in charge of all this. I developed a curriculum, a year-round program. I had to get kids to get into the classes before. And then you're dealing with an entire culture change. You're changing all these kids who hadn't had to do anything before in the weight training class. They're playing basketball, they're doing whatever. Gym teachers running it, and you're changing an entire school's culture. So that was probably the most difficult, because if you compare being an athlete to a coach, there's no comparison.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of kids, and I went from 20 kids in a class to when I left, we had 60 some easily kids in a class, 80 some kids sometimes after school with what you're doing. The springtime, school ended on Friday. The weight room was open on Monday in the summer. There was no breaks there, because you were trying to help them. And I started developing lifters, because that's what I was around during that time. And that's when I had, finished up my career and, was going full time more into the coaching part.
Now, when you went into that coaching part, that was as the PE teacher,
so I was running all the
weight room, or how did that work?
So I was running all the weight training classes. They put under PE. So basically, the athletes can get their weight training done during the school day.
Yes.
Go to practice, go home. That was what I was in charge of setting up.
So it was like it was a PT elective.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. And then the strength and conditioning, you're doing that with the teams after school then?
Yeah.
Too?
So people that weren't in the class yet, as we were building this whole program up.
Yeah.
We were doing that. And then obviously ran in the summer. I didn't give them any breaks. The winter. We had that going on year round.
Yes.
So that was my mentality. Just like I had my own lifting. This is the way we train over here.
Yeah.
So and you're changing entire school's culture, along with coaches and an athletic department, and several hundred teenagers too.
There's two things going on at the same time though. You have the PT class.
Yeah.
Right. Which, excuse me, when I was in high school, I don't want to say I was the PT class teacher, but they would write me out of study hall to sign people in, because we had a weight room, so they had a weight room class. So I spent the first 4 periods there. I'm not doing shit. I'm not going to sit here and say I was coaching anybody, because I wasn't. It was just for the coaches to go to McDonald's and drink coffee and smoke cigarettes. But it got me out of class, which is all I cared about.
Yeah.
But some of the kids would train. Most of them would just sit on the universal machines with their jeans and shit on. And so you're walking into a culture sort of like that.
That sounds pretty much about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so there's that. So there's that you're trying to just make them active, aware. Let's just say that, make them aware.
Yeah.
But then after school, then you were dealing with the sport teams, which you're trying to increase their performance, which there's a lot of the same going on there. But with increasing their performance, now you're going to get into a world of SAQ, speed, agility, quickness. And for a powerlifter, when I was first exposed to that in club training lacrosse players, it's like, oh, fuck, So I would go to clinics and stuff like that to kind of learn those things. Where did you learn that aspect? Because just A-skip, speed, running mechanics, stuff like that probably needs to be taught when they're way younger, by the way.
Yeah.
But you kind of get stuck into that too.
Yeah.
Because you just watch them walk and run and you're like, this doesn't look right. I mean, that's kind of what it was for me. Like, this doesn't look right.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make it right?
Yeah.
And then that's a whole other rabbit hole.
No.
So assuming that you had that rabbit hole, where did you go to try to fill in those gaps?
Yeah, I just did the same thing I did with powerlifting. I looked at who the best strength coaches were, and I started traveling, visiting, volunteering them. I had some Division I guys like Indiana, Purdue, Fort Wayne University was right there. Came down to Indianapolis as well. Made some other friends that were powerlifters that were strength coaches. Charka Hagan, who I competed at the time, was at USC. Ethan Reeves over at Wake Forest. You guys wrote about him. Some of the guys I was pulling off your website, you had a lot of strength coaches on there. So I just reached out to those guys, and it was as simple as what I did for the powerlifting part, going down, traveling, going to see these people. I just did it for the strength coach. It was no big deal. I'll just go visit this guy this weekend. I'll go visit this guy during the break. I had a real good athletic director at the time who was very good old school, and he knew how to develop coaches the way I develop lifters.
Well, it's kind of the same, but it's not.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you start reaching out to those guys, let's just say, to make it simple, there's three type of strength and conditioning coaches. The ones that don't give a fuck, but you're not reaching out to them, right? That's easy to know they're just stupid.
Yeah.
Right. Bad word, ignorant.
Yeah.
No, stupid, because ignorance would mean that they would actually just not know. The stupid people just didn't want to know, right? So there's those.
Yeah.
And then there's the ones that really, really just double, triple down on just basic stuff, which isn't sexy. It's not attractive. And somebody right out of college, if you were like myself, you're not really that appealed to that. It's like, it can't be that fucking easy, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the other ones. It's like, oh, fuck. This is like now way over your head, where you're dealing with block periodization and transition phases and all this kind of shit going on. And you're running into both of those.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you fuck up and try to take the more complex? Because I know I did.
Yeah.
Try to take the more complex because it just looks cooler and it's way more fun because you have more tools to play with.
Yeah.
And tried to apply that to these groups.
Yeah, I messed up. Yeah, I too complex, too looking for this stuff, or this is the new exercise, or reading about this, or seeing this, like, oh, I got to do this, or hey, I saw this online, hey, I got to do this. Yeah, I was way too hard for them at the beginning. I still taught them the basics, still did a very good job with that. That was our foundation. But then I would, this, or I'd have a sport coach come and say, hey, I went to some clinic and saw this, or hey, what do you think about this exercise, And I was, open to it. Hey, let's try it, let's put it in. And then once you get into it and you're looking at your program, and like you said, you're seeing some of the more successful ones, because that was a mistake. It was just too hard to begin. I was like, that's it. I need to simplify this. And luckily, like I said, I had a good athletic director. He actually gave me days. Like, he would pay for my personal days. I'd go down and see some of the better high school strength coaches in Indianapolis. Kevin Vanderbush and Ben Davis. He's been there for over 30 years. I saw him. I saw Center Grove High School, which was dominating athletics at that time. So I went and visited a lot of these guys, and I'm like, okay, this is how they're running all these kids through. This is how they're simplifying it. This is how they're getting them through in this amount of time. This is how they're organizing large groups over here. So that was a craft that I had to build on my own, but I had a good, supportive athletic director who was, hey, yeah, let's do it. Hey, he was believing in me. He goes, I knew you had it. He goes, you just needed the experience. So he pushed me towards that, and he encouraged me all the way through. And that's how I was building the strength philosophy all the way through, the speed development and the organizational part and the time standards, and dealing with other coaches and dealing with an athletic department instead of, hey, why aren't you guys just buying in? You got to coax them in. You got to be a good salesman too. You got to buy all these, the whole department in, because this is something I was starting from the ground up. Did
you go to any of the, I call them SAQ because that's what it was at the time. Did you go to any of those clinics where you had to do the shit yourself? Like hands-on stuff?
Yeah, I went to a couple of those too. And then
How'd that go?
Luckily I had, I trained athletically, even with my powerlifting and stuff too. I think that's where I kept all my assistance work up. And I think that's what held me healthier than most of the lifters around me. And even my lifters today, something I keep them athletic. So yeah, those were tough. Those were challenging, but it's like, hey, I got to learn how to do this stuff. Lee Taft was a good friend of mine, Mr. Speed and Agility himself. And I was going through his stuff, and, you see the big guy out there running, trying to run this stuff and learn it. And, he would coach me on some stuff like that I needed to do. So I didn't feel embarrassed or anything. It was just me learning and me jumping in where other people would just not do that. And it was me being the best strength coach I could be.
Yeah, theirs was there was one I ended up going to that was, it was more or less a sales pitch by the time it was all over with, but I'm 290 at the time. I'm in the prime of my West Side competing below days.
Okay.
Right. And a couple things I took away from this was I strained my back that morning doing the dynamic work. So the whole time we aren't playing like, oh, fuck, so I'm dealing with that. And so all I'm hoping is if I can get to the hotel, if they have some kind of weight room, even universal, just to do rep work, just to get some blood in the back, then I should be able to just walk and get through. Yeah. Because I'm thinking we're just going to sit in classes and shit like that. Yeah. Or if they have steam sauna, something just to loosen it up. Because I assume that you've tweaked your back. So it wasn't like it was one of those things where you felt like you had to crawl out, and driving home sucked because you can't find the right, the right position for the car seat to go in, and then straight to a plane with Blue Horse Limit on, because it was straight from the gym to there. And I find out really quickly after sitting in the classroom for an hour and a half, they're going to divide people up, take half of them to the weight room, teach them how to do lifts, then the other ones to the field. I didn't want to go to the weight room because I'm like, there's nothing they're going to teach me here. I'm just looking around. Like and even the good presenters, but the presenters weren't exactly appealing to me from the strength side. Now the SAQ side, yes. Next thing I find, I'm out there and I'm doing fucking speed ladders, A skips, B skips, and I'm sweating like a mother. One other dude there was a lifter, thank God, but I'm making my way through all of this crap. Last on everything, by the way, and then feel like I'm going to die, go through. Thankfully, they gave me a couple extra shirts because I'm just like tearing through these shirts. Yeah. But my couple Tate, I met Bill Barisi that day, so that was a huge takeaway because, and then Bill became a contact to be able to help me out later.
Got all his DVDs and all that stuff. Yeah.
And I believe Martin Rooney was there at the time. There were some other people there at the time. Now it ended with this big fuck fest of all these guys arguing with each other on the future of what this was going to be. And I think what they did is they were looking for personal trainers that were in the country, that were exceeding where they were. And I worked for Club Corp of America at the time, which was a franchise of hospitality health. It was like a country club without the golf course, just food, recreational type of thing. So they were looking for people that may have influence to be able to push a certification that I think they were trying to develop. Yeah. And then it became this clusterfuck of all these guys arguing with each other on what this certification, and we're kind of like sitting there like, kind of reminded me of something that happened not that long ago in a seminar that I was at, but it was, kind of something along those lines. And, but the next day when I left, my back was better. So I'm like, wait a minute. Now, granted, I'm not thinking I need to start doing all this shit, right? But I was very intrigued on how all that movement, to that higher level, worked better than just doing a bunch of reverse hypers and what I would do before. So conditioning, that was my takeaway. Like conditioning matters, maintaining some kind of mobility matters. With all these different skips, I was actively, actively stretching away, butt kicks, quads, all these type of things. And I was able to apply all that. But then I was also able to go to, I think it was Bill and then Martin, to be able to say, now out of all this, and then Buddy as well. Okay. Because they were selling a lot of tools. Yeah. Speed ladders, all this other shit. Yep. And I'm like,
of course, it comes with everything.
Yeah. So like, what exactly, Buddy, like what exactly do you don't need any fucking things. You just need, the skips, the drills there. Yeah. Good to go. But, it was an experience I'll never fucking forget though, but it was that rabbit hole of this can go really deep, which for me led to Charlie Francis, all this other kind of stuff, which was far beyond the lacrosse players that were 40 years old that I was working with. Yeah. But it was interesting for me at least, and I wonder how your interpretation of this was, how you start to see that like the real origins of periodization started from my perception in track and field. Yeah. And then outside of the Olympic weightlifting, but even there was a lot of commonalities, between all that, how it was kind of structured, which it helped me with understanding broad periodization, annual, multi-year plans and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Did you already have a grasp of that before going down that route or during that route?
I had a very basic understanding, but nowhere near, just like you did with powerlifting, until you got in with people and started really immersing yourself into it. So I had an understanding, but no, not until I started speaking with these guys, going to some of these places like you did, running through this stuff, seeing the athleticism involved, talking to how they would periodize this, how you should structure this, how they were doing speed development over here, how only your time limit should be this part when you're training athletes. Hey, here's what they're doing at practice. What should you be doing during this time? Should you be keeping this up? Hey, these guys are already jumping. Why are you going to have them do more plyometric work during this? So it was neat to hear about how these guys were doing, because I get introduced to Charlie Francis, Dr. Michael Yessis. He was on there about his plyometric work. Veroshansky, you're reading about all these other guys, shock method and everything, in addition to what you've already learned about strength training. So it was like great, because I'm like, okay, I was like, how can I apply this? What can I take from this too? For my own training, for my athletes training. How can I apply this at my level? Because I got to simplify this. I can't be bringing this. I've already tried that complex stuff, and I screwed up on that. That was too much too soon, So yeah, learning from all these guys, hearing them talk, seeing how they periodize their training. Like you said, the track and field part. I thought that was neat. I saw how they were doing the weight training when you read about Ben Johnson and how he was doing, and Charlie Francis was training him with his strength training in addition to his speed training, and how they were able to progress on those and keep him injury free. So it was neat to kind of tie all that in. And I was like, man, I'm being a better coach. I was helping my own lifting. I was bringing that back to my lifters and stuff too. Not tell them, hey, we're going to train like track stars, but I kept them athletic. And that was one of the things I've noticed, where my athletes, where I've had a lot of my lifters for over 10 years now, they're still making progress. They're still staying injury free. They're still progressing. And people are like, how are you guys still like keep going? I'm like, because we have this tremendous base. Even if they didn't get the base that I got for those 3 years, I still in their off season am building that up. It's something they all kind of, if they came to me when they were younger, that I was able to build into their training that helps them last all the way through, not just training the big three. Because like you said, that's something we've seen too much. I've seen too much as people, like, we're getting all these results. We're running Smolov's training cycle, 4 weeks maxes go up, and then all of a sudden people were training the big lifts, and then they were getting injured. They were getting banged up. They were, well, this happened, or then they would just disappear. It's like, what's going on? It's because they never were building some of the assistance work. They were never doing exercises they needed to, in addition to just the big three. I tell people when they come to train with me, I said, I can put you on this, but you're going to get injured. You're going to get burned out. You're going to make progress real quick, but then in the long run, you're going to be messed up.
Yeah,
Let's be honest.
Yeah, for me, it was more the how they were periodizing the different motor abilities based upon the sport, because the sports had a season.
Yeah.
Where powerlifting is kind of easy, right? Because there's
go to a meet, plan your meet out.
Like, you don't have this in-season football, off-season football, these breaks, and then they need more motor abilities than just strength.
Yeah.
There's endurance, skill, there's all these different motor abilities that have to be put in there, and, how to block them, and then how long that can sustain before it will regress, and something has to go in for that. That was the most intriguing part with me. What didn't matter again when I dialed it back to the 40-year-old lacrosse player that was showing up twice a week. Yeah. But it made me look at, just the programming for powerlifting differently.
Yes.
Yep. Entirely, because it's like, okay, now wait a minute, what are we doing here? Like, do we need to be prepared 6 weeks after a meet, or do we need to be focusing more on other abilities that can be stacked? Yeah. Going forward, without it becoming linear periodization, which kind of where it roots from. There's so much information out there now that I don't know if an aspiring coach has to go down that rabbit hole if they explore, different types of periodization, or just actually just periodization as it is. Yeah. Right. Because that gets misused. And when you say that, people my age and older just think linear periodization. That's the default, but that's not really, what it is. It's building all these motor abilities over a period of time to be able to scale, long term. So as you're implementing all this we'll just stay with the high school athletes for now. So it's the basic stuff. It's a kind of a loaded question in general, because you've worked with a lot of them, right? How long does it take to where you can start moving from, like, goblet squats, basic box squats, body weight box squats, stuff like that, to actually loaded squats, assuming that they're showing up, which if it's a class, you know, and they should.
Yeah.
Is it faster than one would think or slower?
Depends on your setup. When you go into high school, I think the number one thing any young high school strength coach should do is put a lot of focus on their younger kids in the middle school level, building that developmental level up. For my kids, when they come in, when I first started that program, PVC pipes. We were all these are the 8th graders coming as freshmen. They were probably out there for a good 3 weeks, just learning how to hip hinge. I pulled out all the bleachers because again, you're getting 60, 70 kids. You want boxes. I pulled out all the bottom bleachers. I would teach them how to sit back and do a squat, how to get their shins vertical so they actually learn how to do that. I would teach them how to stiffen their back up for like an RDL. We would do a ton of movements that I could teach them with lunges with it, how to keep your back straight. So it was over and over again. So that lasted probably about 3 or 4 weeks in the summer. Then I would slowly integrate those incoming freshmen into the weight room as I saw fit. And then for them, I would just give them parameters like, no missing reps. I'd just give them certain directions for the day. Here's your goal for the day. Here's what I'm looking for. But at that time, I had some of my older kids who were also helping me during that time. So I had a lot more eyes in there, just like how we talked about. You got to have a lot of coaches. So I didn't have a lot of sport coaches. I had a few. So I just took the older kids that had been around me. I said, you're volunteering during this time, but I will train you afterwards.
How do you keep them paying attention?
What's that, the younger kids?
Yes.
You just keep them focused on the task in hand. I had a timer that was set up in the weight room. So again, you're dealing with large groups of kids. So you had this amount of time per that, and I would bring them all in, show them 1 or 2 things. That's it. Simple. 1 or 2 things. Now go out and do it. And I would just go around and coach them. And so with my assistant coaches, I had interns from a local college and stuff too, helping out that time. Bring them all back in, show them 1 or 2 simple things, bring them back out. And at the end, I'd put them through, a calisthenic workout, body weight workout, something to, really tax them and stuff on there. But it's just simple. 1 or 2 things, send them out, go coach them up, bring them back in. Hey, this is what I'm seeing from everybody. And during that time, my coach was saying, hey, you can go up a little bit. Hey, you need to go down. There was no missing reps allowed at that time. And that's how we just kind of modified it. And then from there, Dave, I kept a freshman only weights class. So that way I could develop them at my level and my speed. So that way and it was just one of those things, it was a daily thing. Hey, we're ready for this part. Hey, we're ready for this part. Hey, we got these basics down. We're going to start teaching you guys an Olympic lift from here. You actually know how to keep your back straight. You can actually deadlift off the ground. You can actually squat below parallel now. You can actually keep your elbows up on a front squat. So I kept the freshmen always separate. And then my 10th through 12th graders, I had those, they kind of had to be mixed into classes together. But that's what I did. I started them as, incoming from there. Freshman classes only separate. I brought those. There were some times that, we'd be on certain things for half a year. Sometimes, I could get them up a little bit faster. You just make individual changes. Then you had your 10th through 12th grade classes after that. That's when kind of really plug in the training with those guys. They'd been through experience. They had that low level training. They had that base level training. They understood at least the basics of my philosophy every day. We can get those guys trained. You mentioned a few benchmarks in there for the freshmen. So what would be those benchmarks to be able to know that they're ready to move on, to that next thing? Yeah, I guess it was just looking at the general form. Technique was the number one emphasis overall, and if they got it with good technique, they could go up. If they got that with, I kept usually 5 reps and below. You start getting 8s and 10s, it turns in conditioning. They're worried about getting the weight and the reps. So it's always 5 reps and below on stuff. Looking, it was really a daily coaching thing, and my coaches and myself, my interns, I train them to be like, hey, tell these kids, hey, you can go up now. Hey, you can put hey, you need to put another 10 on each side, not a 5 on each side there. So the kids understood, okay, now I can work up. Okay. Like, no, your elbows started flaring out. Your feet are kicking up on your bench press. Nope. You got to go back down on there. And my kids just started seeing that. And I think it was more the culture that we had built, because I had these interns saying it, I had my older kids saying it, and my younger kids were just absorbing it. Like, okay, that's just the way it is. They don't know any better. All right, so you got a small list of benchmarks. It's not like 20 different benchmarks that they need to go through. Yeah. No, it's not like you have to, and it was a daily thing. But some kids, I'm like, well, some kids, they weren't going to drop into a full squat clean. Some kids, they were just going to power clean. Some kids, they were just going to still work on deadlift during that time. Some kids, I'm like, you're just going to stick with front squats. We're not going to back squat yet on this. Then how has that changed for that population over the period of, say, the last decade that you've been coaching, teaching, because we're not to the, teaching them, or is it still kind of the same thing? No, the kids are coming in worse than ever. The athleticism is very gone in a lot of them. They don't come in with any type of base, with level. I mean, they're so hard. You see kids, we've talked about it many times, the one sport athletes already. Maybe they're playing a couple sports, but I think the athleticism is so down, and the kids come in to me need so much work with everything. I never used to do all this hip mobility and all this stuff to get the kids, to be able to squat correctly and everything else. So I've had to put some more stuff in that normally I'd be like, no, there's no way I'm putting that in my program. I've had to. And then having the middle school program and even youth programs, which we did at Center Grove High School. We were one of the most dominating sports programs in all the state of Indiana. It's because we had our youth kids learning this stuff. We had our middle school program going all throughout the year. And we had our high school program as well. Plus the weight room was open all the time. And we had several strength coaches.
So what are some examples of the regressions that you had to put in because they're coming in less mobile?
Yeah. Starting, it's a simple box squat technique. We have boxes at every single station over there. So some kids, like, we have to stop them above parallel. Some kids we can go to parallel. Some kids we can go below. And we'd write on their workout card, this is how many boxes you have to have, or this is your height for right now. And I would just change that as they were able to actually squat lower and actually be able to sit back into an actual good squat form on there. Same thing on deadlift, no rounded backs in my gym. I'm not, at that level, because you're teaching the kids actually how to stay tight.
Yeah.
So, if they rounded, nope, dropping the weights down over here. Hey, platform 2, Mike, drop them down. Nope, take 25 each side. It's not good enough yet.
So are you starting with deadlifts or RDLs, or where are you starting?
I started with RDLs and everything first. That was with the PVC pipes and the weight room with those kids, and I taught that first. And then, I'd bring them to an elevated deadlift. The plates were on boxes, and they would work on form. And just like a box squat, I would just drop them down slowly. You need to stay at this height. Some of my tall basketball players, they couldn't get down in good positions on there. So I'm like, hey, you're going to stay at this height until we see fit, then I'll drop you down here. So some guys were pulling off there. Some guys were off the ground at that point. Some guys were full squatting all the way down. Some guys were sticking with their boxes. I had some athletes that, hey, we're just going to front squat mostly for you and maybe belt squat the other day. They just, it wasn't happening for them.
Yeah.
And I forced it enough, and it wasn't going to go, hey, we need to work on this to get you better.
All right. So now when they hit that strength and conditioning phase, well, let's just use the example of the swim team that you told me about. So they're graduated from this freshman thing, right? So you can actually start doing stuff with them.
Yeah.
So how did you work with that swim team to be able to get them to dominate?
Yeah, I had a very good swim coach who understood. I actually talked to him about periodization stuff, and we talked about, meso macro cycles and everything, and how he was doing his and my philosophy. He was a younger guy. He was really into it. And we had not even won a sectional since the 1980s. So I go, something's got to change. He was my first coach to say, hey, can we start the club kids, like, take them out of the pool twice a week and lift them? And that was like an uproar, like, parents like, we're paying for swim lessons, not, strength conditioning lessons. He goes, just give it time. So he brought them in, and I would teach them all the basic stuff. And we just do a simple sled workout, conditioning workout at the end, make them feel good. And it took about us 2 years, and we had won the first sectional title since the 80s. And then probably the third going on the fourth year is when we finished second in the state. And the only team that beat us was the #1 team in the nation, Carmel. But that swim coach had all those kids training. He kept going on that philosophy with the parents, the community, the kids. He was always in the weight room with me too, taking attendance, dealing with the stuff that I didn't need to be dealing with.
Yeah.
And he was one of the better coaches, and his results were just phenomenal on there. We started sending kids to IU to swim. We started Indiana University, started sending kids to Purdue, Evansville, a lot of Division I schools, because we had this training program going all the way through, and he was just dominating.
So what did the program look like?
Man, it was so simple. I'll give you a good example. We weren't doing all the bands and the dry land stuff, and some of the stuff you'll shake your head. I remember my swim coach was talking to a few other sports programs, and he goes, oh, we got these kids out with these shoulder problems and these. He goes, what about you? And he goes, we don't have any of that. He goes, what? He goes, and the other guys were bragging about, well, we do all this preventative stuff before. He goes, we don't do that. He goes, well, what do you guys do? He goes, our coach teaches our kids right exercises. He brings them along slowly. He goes, I've never seen them miss reps in there before. He pushes them on certain things they can be pushed on. But he goes, everything is done to a T, just the way I coach in swimming. So we have a great understanding. And our kids were stronger by the end of the season. We were faster. We were better. Their confidence was up, Dave, because they're hitting numbers like, wow, it's sectional time. We're peaking this kid for state. And these kids are like, man, I just set a PR, man. I'm like, how do you feel? Like, you're getting their confidence up. You do that to a kid, they're going to perform better. I don't care what sport they're in.
What are the main movements that you're using as drivers?
Basic fundamentals. We were doing back squats with them, front squats with them. Deadlifts are huge. Obviously, a lot of back work with the swimmers. I mean, their posture, if you look at any of those, especially over time. So rows all the time, pull-ups and chin-ups done correctly all the time. A lot of upper back work. Some of the powerlifting movements that I would do in here. Dips, like I said, a lot of pull-ups. If he would ever do anything at practice, he would always let me know. Ab work, we did weighted ab work, not this body weight stuff over and over again. Your abs are like any other muscle group. You have to train them. If you want your bench to go up, you got to add weight to it. If you want your ab strength to go up, your lower back strength to go up, you got to add weight to it. So we added weight to everything that we could with those kids. And, they were healthy at the end of the season. They were setting PRs, and they were just dominating.
Was that the same way that you were training the other sports as well?
A majority of the time, yeah. If you start getting sport specific at this high school level, you get it when you're training your sport, and that is too much what I run into. And I've been at a high school where they were trying to do that, and it was just a cluster all over the board. When I came down here to Center Grove High School, when we had an actual program all the way through, everybody was on the same page because we're dealing with basic fundamentals. You know, you're trying to get the kids in the weight room as much as it is. So we simplified our program even more to front squats, deadlifts, benches. You know, we had cleans in there, a lot of row work, some kettlebell work, plyometric work, box squats in there. You know, sled work, whatever was conditioning stuff at the end, ab work that we could do. But it was pretty simple. It was so like the kids had bought into it. And I think that was the biggest part is we simplified it, but everybody was on board. Like, this is a school-wide strength conditioning program. If you start getting to all these other little things, I've never seen a successful school do that.
How are you physically structuring those movements for these kids?
Yeah. You know, just looking at what they're training with everything. So in my groups, I would have kids come in. You might have swimmers mixed in with football players and everything. So it's just communicating with them. You talk to them at the beginning of class. You'd be like, hey, you know, if they're out of season football, hey, you guys are over here. You guys are hitting this. Hey, you guys come over here with me. Hey, my distance runners. I had a great distance program. My coach at Trine University now, he was my high school coach. We ended up being top in the state too. Again, he would just communicate, hey, these are high volume run days. So even though it was like maybe a lower body day for everybody, I wanted to keep my class organized and set up. I would just tell them, hey, here's what I need you to do. You guys are going to drop down 2 or 3 columns on your training today. Here's the sets and reps I want you guys to get. Here's you got your high volume going on. So this is what I want you to do. My swimmers, they would always talk about, you know, peaking out and tapering and everything. That's a big word for the swim program. So we would just talk to them. You know, the coach would say something to them. I would say something to them in the class, like, here's where I want you guys at. And I would just go around and coach them and make sure they were following those.
Are you physically structuring the repetitions though?
Yeah, a lot of the main lifts, Dave, during the end season, I keep 5 reps and below. I will work the kids up at times to kind of see where they're at. Assistants work probably 8 reps and below during that time. With the kids. Now, if they have breaks, like if there's my wrestlers, like if they have Christmas break and they don't have school and tournaments and all this other stuff, then I will beat them up and put them through some harder workouts because the wrestlers lose a ton of muscle mass during the season, especially when they're cutting weight and everything. So during those times, like, hey, we have that, or the coach is like, hey, we have nothing this week. You know, we'd bring them in extra or something like that, or he'd just give me some extra time in the weight room with them. And those guys I could put through harder. I'd give them maybe a couple more assistance work, or hey, I'd push the main lifts harder, you know, with what we have going on. And that's how I brought those guys up. It's just communicating with the coach, looking at their sports program, and making sure you're seeing the results on the mat, on the platform, you know, on the field with what you're doing.
Now, is the working them up just to get an idea of where your percent range is for the 5s?
Yeah, you know, I want to see where they're at, you know, and those kids always want to see, like, hey, if they're getting a little bit of progress, hey, you know, hey, I hit 5s better this week than last week, you know, if we're running it for 2 or 3 weeks in a row on here because I wasn't quite satisfied, or depending on what they're at with their training cycle on there. So yeah, but it was just something that the kids could always focus on. It just, anything above that just ended up turning into conditioning and them just trying to get the reps, and technique was all over the place. Yeah. And it was just horrible. I'm like, I'm not having a weight room like that.
What about dropping it down into 3s and singles?
Yeah, you know, my wrestlers, I probably had great success with them. I had a couple of state champions come out of my group recently. They were all wrestling Division I. And right before state meet, we talked to them because these guys were peaking for state. They were going to be in the state. They were going to be placing and going to the state finals. It was as clear as that. So they would tell me, you know, when sectionals, a lot of other programs would dial back. They would do that whole maintenance thing and lift lighter. No, boys. We're training to peak you for state. We're not training for this. We still have 3 weeks until state. Why would you want to dial back? This is what's been working. So I pushed those guys all the way up too. I pushed them up till about a week before state, honestly. And they would just, not maxes or anything like that. I'd have them hit like some heavy doubles, some singles, and those kids' confidence. I'm like, how you feeling? He goes, I feel great. And when those guys went to the state tournament, some of those guys that they had lost to, they go, Coach, I felt amazing. They go, I felt dominant over that kid. You know, he won 8-0 when that kid beat me earlier in the season, and that's when it mattered the most. They go, I feel good. Like, I felt like I was just, you know, tearing that kid apart. And that's what I want to hear as a coach. Yeah. Because I would keep bringing their strength up just a little bit. I never let them lose confidence. Never let them miss. And you know how it is as a coach. You can see, like, well, it's not really a good day. I know you're cutting weight. Let's dial some stuff back on there. Again, just talk with the kids, communicate with that. But they would see that and they'd feel it at the end of the season. And then the results showed on the map for them.
All right, let's take a break real quick. Then we'll get into the powerlifting stuff.
All right.
One of the best ways that you can support the podcast and your training is to join the crew. When you join the crew, you get an extra crew cast podcast every single month. You also get access to our Discord, which has a training Q&A with Team Elite FTS members. You get form checks. You can upload any of your training footage and have your lifts diagnosed, sometimes within minutes, by multiple people. Access to close to 30 different ebooks, training logs, and first sign up access to our weekend training retreats, train your ass off, and other events that we do. Biggest takeaways from that, though, what people enjoy the most and get the most out of is the training Q&A and the form checks, as well as the extra podcast. Hey guys, I'm back in the gym with another limited edition apparel drop. This is the new Live, Learn, Pass On shirt. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our cambered grip American cable attachment. This attachment has 4 grips and it's cambered. So when you flip it, it actually becomes 8 grips. And if you turn it upside down, there's actually 16. This is one of our most used cable attachments out in the gym. Even got that full range of motion. We got a second limited edition drop this month as well. Head over to elitefts.com, pick up the shirt, pick up the cable attachments, and we'll see you next time.
Americ Health is a premium telehealth platform specializing in hormone optimization and preventative medicine. Are you looking to optimize your health in and out of the gym, improve recovery, sex drive, and quality of life? Have you tried speaking to your health professional about this and have gotten the cold shoulder, stereotyped, or just told as part of getting older? You just go to americhealth.com/table talk and you can create your own lab, or you can take labs that we've had set up for them, which are based upon the same labs that I've been doing over the last 15 years. Or you can use their guided optimization. With this, they'll put you in touch with a patient care coordinator, which is actually pretty cool because you get to sit down and speak to somebody that can understand what you're looking for from hormone optimization and the preventative medicine standpoint. After that conversation, they'll determine which labs that you should and which tests you should have done, and then from there, get the labs done. They'll review those labs with you and put you in touch with one of their hormone optimization specialists that can determine which supplementation that you should use over the counter or prescription. americhealth.com/table talk. The discount code is table talk. So to jump back into this, I want to get into the powerlifting side of the training, because we've kind of established how your methodology philosophy was created over a period of time. Now, let's start with what are the 3 girls' names? Chloe's one, right?
Yeah, and then Shelby Miles and Jenica Baldridge.
Okay, so they came to you while they were in high school?
Yeah, they were just athletes, and part of what I was doing was showing that the athletics of that school could win, because you had a lot of negative energy there, and like, oh, we can't win with these. Yeah, you can. You just got to invest in time with these kids. You can do that. And I was just looking for kids who were going above and beyond, who were just doing the extra stuff, who were coming to the open stuff, the optional stuff that was available on, Fridays and Saturdays, and not worrying about, what do they have going on. And several kids started showing up, but these kids were just never missed. They just kept showing up, kept getting results, kept showing up, and it started building from there.
Were they training in your garage?
No, at that time, we were primarily in the high school weight room where I was a strength coach at. So we were just training up there. They would be in class with me. They would come afterwards. There's only so much you can get done in a PE class, 50 minutes. They got to get changed. They got to go back to class. You got to tell them what's going on, get them organized, get them warmed up, get them going. So they would hit like their main stuff in class, and they would come after school and hit whatever accessories I told them to hit. And then we didn't do a lot of deadlifting during the day. We did a lot of cleans and stuff like that. But then, if we were running heavy deadlifts because they were going to get ready for lifting meet, then we would start running heavy deadlifts. And those were on Fridays or Saturdays. That was kind of the optional day. Other kids could come in and stuff too. But we made those the optional day, and that was part of theirs. Like, hey, well, this is your training day, though. That's optional to everyone else. But now that you guys are in this is your training day for this part. All
right. So if we're to break them into 3 phases of their career, like the beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Yeah. That during that beginner time, what did their training look like? Yeah. Let's just say you kind of already said it, they're doing whatever you're doing in the class and then the deadlifts and shit, later in that time. But from your philosophy background, do you have them in 5s, 3s? What kind of level of specialization during the beginning phase was there, or was there none at all?
Yeah, well, they all came in with tremendous athletic backgrounds. A lot of them had, the gymnastics, martial arts, volleyball, track and field. So a lot of those, the cheerleading part too. So a lot of them came in with a really good background of athleticism when they came in. You could tell that right away with the stuff I was teaching them going through. They started like everybody else did. And then I would progress them like, oh, okay, these guys can go up more. Hey, you guys can do this. And most importantly, they wanted to. It wasn't like, well, they would just put a 5 on. Hey, can I put a 10 on each side? Hey, can I stay after class? Can I put this weight on? Hey, I want to try this. I think I can get this. And I just saw as their technique went up, I gave them simple linear periodization, the easiest, most fundamental, basic stuff on there till they learned and understood what it meant to actually put a training program together, to increase maxes and to max out at certain points in time. And so once they understood that, then I got a little more specialized with what they were doing. I think the number one thing I did with them was I hammered on technique over and over and over again. And I would do that to a certain point where you can only squat for so long, Dave. You can only bench for so long. Yeah. Then I would put like assistance work in, like, it was again, fundamental stuff at the beginning. I'll give an example. We did our bench for the day. They might do close grip bench after that. Just kind of like Westside work, dips if we had, heavy triceps, heavy upper back and rows, finish the day off. They would squat. I did run a lot of pause squats because a lot of them couldn't figure out the bottom position yet. So I think that was a big part. Ed Cohen's big on that. Ed, tremendous. He loved his pause squats with everything. So it's not like I stole it from him, but I put more emphasis on it during that time because I was teaching them about that position. So I did that with those guys, basic glute ham raises, a lot of heavy ab work, again, more back work. Deadlifts, one thing I got from Vince Anello was you always want to be tired going into a deadlift. You never just want to walk in and just start deadlifting. Vince was always a big believer is you have to do some type of squat, some type of ab work. You have to do something because it's always the last thing in a meet. It's always when you're tired. And the old saying in powerlifting, the meet doesn't start till the bar hits the ground. So I got that from Vince. So I just have them do like a lighter squat. A lighter squat might be 10% of what they did earlier in the week on that Tuesday if it's Saturday. So just something where it's going to tax you a little bit, not take away from you, but it's going to make you, in a good state like that. Plus, it was always a great warm-up for them, and they loved it. I might do front squats if it was the off-season before we deadlift, and then we'd kind of have our deadlift day. I might do volume work on them with deadlifts. I might go into pause deadlifts where you just bring it up an inch off the ground because, again, a lot of them, they would round their backs. They couldn't figure out position yet. They just didn't know. So a lot of pause work, a lot of tempo work with them. Hey, no, 1, 2, 3 off the ground, then you can finish fast.
When you're saying technique work, what you're explaining right now is kind of built into wherever that's going to fall on their training day. Yeah. Were they doing technical lifts with PVC pipe bars on other days?
I get what you're saying. Technique work, Dave, is just me coaching them every set. I guess that's what I'm looking at is like every set, like, especially on their warm-ups too, like, I was watching everything in between, I was training with everybody else. We had other athletes and stuff in there too. But I'm like, nope, you got to do this on this. Hey, I need you to change this up for today. Hey, remember what we worked on last time? We got to build off that for today. I need to see this better, better job today. Hey, maybe you need to do some pause deadlifts at the beginning before you actually get into your regular deadlift working sets. You don't look too good off the ground right now. You're starting to round, your shoulders are getting over the barbell. So it's just what I saw every single day over and over again.
So at that level, are there more sets with the bar before you start progressing in weight just to work the technique?
No, because Dave, you can sit there and work with a bar with 135, but until you get some weight on their back above 80%, I don't believe that weaknesses start showing up. And they really, really don't start showing up until you get above 90%, and going from there. So I would work them up as I saw fit. It was just a daily coaching thing. It was a coaching eye, I guess, is the big. There's no real, saying I could put on it. It was just, hey, this is what we need to work on. Hey, this is kind of like an idea where I want you at for the day. If it was 300 for 5 on your deadlift, sometimes we had to stop at 275. It just wasn't going to be there for the day. I'd maybe drop them back down, do sets with, 225, 250, somewhere in there, at least some type of sub-maximal weight. But you have to get weight on the bar. I see too many coaches, they'll sit there, well, we're just working with 135. I'm like, get some weight on the bar. Weaknesses will start showing up. You can actually coach the kids better. Kids will actually tighten up more when you get them a little bit more weight. I'm not saying you have them where they're put in a bad position to get injured, but you got to get some weight on them, and then you can coach them from there.
But in that first phase, their technical skills are going to increase faster than their strength skills. Yeah. Right. So how are you accommodating for that? So let's make it easy and just say you're running triples for 12 weeks. Okay. They can, God, at that point, they can go from like 65 pounds, then 4 weeks later, they're at 185. Yeah. But if you're sticking to straight linear, you got 6 months before you get to that. So how were you kind of working with that?
Yeah. So what I would do is I would just set up, we had 9 weeks every single quarter. So we do about, once they got technicals, they had the basic knowledge, their technique was pretty decent. I just put them on, 8-week training cycles. That 9th week, we'd work up heavy, not necessarily max them out, but work them up very heavy singles. And then I would start over with another training block. And I would say, hey, these are the new things you need to work on. Remember how you did this in your squat. Remember how you did this in your bench press. Remember how you lost your shoulder position. These are some new things I need you guys to work on. So again, I would work that in with their new training block. Once they got sufficient enough on that, let's set another 8-week training block on them. 9th week, we'd kind of, do some basic testing on there, hit some heavy singles. Until, like I said, if we were preparing for a meet. But there was a lot of athletic lifts. So to give you an example in the beginning, maybe we might squat for 20 minutes or so, just so I saw like, hey, that's enough. Like we could. Then I would just do simple stuff like afterwards. We do lunges to work on, glute ham raises, ab work, back work. I picked stuff that they really needed to work on. A lot of the girls came in, and a lot of all my athletes, we hear it all the time, so much quad domination, especially female athletes are so built in the front. So a lot of long step lunges, leg curls and stuff were fine. We might do this at the very end of our workout, but really a lot of glute ham raises, a lot of back extensions. Got that from a lot of Olympic weightlifters too. I mean, if you hear the Russian Olympic weightlifting coaches, they talk about either find the back extension or find the wheelchair. They were big on strengthening up the backside. So I didn't do too much good mornings. They did RDLs, especially at the beginning. I kind of got away from those. I might do those after a meet. Just to get away from regular, deadlifting for a little bit. I might throw those in a couple training cycles too, but it was really looking at their technique for about 20 minutes or so on that lift till I saw that lift kind of getting burned out, and then just rotating them through basic, like I said, the lunges, the back work, the pull-up work. Those were their foundation. That was probably going on for at least their first couple of years. All
right, so I'm going to assume that they were very coachable when it came to just teaching them the body weight box squats and kind of locking that in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're used to, when you get the gymnasts and you get the people that are used to being corrected, they don't take it as like, oh, this guy's saying this or that. No, they want to be corrected. They're used to getting hundreds of corrections a day, little stuff like that. So there was no problem. There was no ego. They were wanting to be helped. They wanted to get better, and they were seeing results.
Okay. The reason I'm putting that, because I've seen a few different ways that people will implement for powerlifters technical, just call it practice into a program. Yeah. Some will have, a basic warm up, and then immediately after that, they may squat, bench, and deadlift each day. Yeah. But it's not a lot, like 95 pounds for 6 sets of 5. Yeah. Just to make sure they're reinforcing. But those are also lifters that may not be as coachable, that just need more repetitions to reinforce what that is, where that almost becomes what it is not necessary after a certain point, because the skill acclimation is there. But if they have that strong athletic background, then you can kind of jump over that. Yeah. Where I see that as a mistake that a lot of coaches sometimes will make, because yes, you can make a shitty squat a stronger shitty squat, but you're doing all this other stupid warm up stuff where you could just simply do the body weight, all these things that you were talking about, body weight box squats, wall squats, all these things just to kind of reinforce that. But it sounds like they really didn't need a whole lot of that.
Yeah, no, not at the beginning. I mean, they need a lot of back work. A lot of them were very good. A lot of them were strong in their shoulders, just like any of my athletes coming in. A lot of them were strong with their quads, but they had no hamstrings, no posterior chain that we've, heard about in strength conditioning or powerlifting for as far back as I can remember. Yeah. So I just spent a lot of time, and you're talking about years, building those weaknesses up until they became strong points in their lifts, and their lifts even took apart. I mean, if you look at my training, 3 years of all that wrestling training and the sled work and the rope climbs and the pull-ups and, the Russian push-ups coming off chairs and plyo stuff that guy did. When I hit the barbell lifts, I didn't, at the time when I was 14, 15 years old, I didn't understand why I was progressing way more than everybody else when I started with the barbell. Like, it was just going through the roof, and some guys would kind of get hurt in high school, and I'm like, I just kept going and going and going because I had that. And when I looked at what I could do with these kids, I looked at where their athleticism was, where their weak points were, and how long it was going to take me to get there. So it was just me identifying that, which was kind of common. Let's be honest, you're dealing with high school kids who've never really worked out before. It's pretty simple stuff to do as long as you're involved in the strength conditioning field.
Now, when they moved into that intermediate phase, now things get a little harder. Yeah. Right. So how did that evolve through that phase?
Well, one thing I did at my end of the career, with the West Side methods, you asked me about mine. I worked with the coach from Norway, who's Detmar Wolf, who's actually the coach of Team Germany right now, national coach. He sent me a lot of his training. I used to have to download, oh my gosh, I just speak Norwegian and download his stuff to have it in English so I could do it. He sent me a lot of lifts where I needed to train the lifts more often because I was doing too much variation with the conjugate stuff. And I knew that. And that's at the end of my career really helped me excel to those lifts that I needed to. So again, when I was training them, I gave them a lot more. Once they moved past the box squats and everything like that, I gave them a lot more free squats during the time.
Yeah.
But I still never let go of the assistance work. I still never let go of, hey, we're going to work on these assistants for the next 3 or 4 weeks, and then I'm going to switch it up. That's where we got it from Louis' system, the conjugate method. So that's where I started blending. Like, we need to hit the main lifts over here for the power lifters. I'm going to set these other things up in training blocks too. The off season, I might give them variations of squats to do. I might do a lot of high bar close stand squats, a lot of close grip bench press work. Some stuff, they get done with the meet, we're not doing, full arches and everything like that. I'll give them some more athletic lifts. I'll have them do some conditioning work, tax some different energy systems with them, because I wanted them to be athletic all the time. And it seemed like, that was what a lot of other lifters were missing, especially ones that didn't, unfortunately have good coaches that were going through. So it was just simple as looking at everybody else was doing, what was working, what wasn't. My mistakes, stuff that I had learned, especially at the later part of my career, how to kind of combine these, where I was training main lifts, but also still having my assistance work to help me out. Because good mornings, you guys used to write about those, a high percentage you guys used to use those. I used to live and die. I built my first 700-pound deadlift off those. But as I got later in my career, it became detrimental where too heavy of those were taken away from my training. So I found out, if I could work up to, as long as my good mornings were around 405, I knew my back was strong enough to enter a training cycle really good. So I was looking at some of those in my own, like, I still build them up good, but then I wanted more main lifts. I wanted them to practice those. I wanted to be really sufficient and hard, so they didn't have to do stuff. Like later on in my career, Ed Cohn and I had a talk. He goes, with your technique where it's at, he goes, you're just going to have to simply, like, you got told you're going to have to get stronger.
Yeah.
You're going to have to get stronger at your lifts, the way you're deadlifting and the way you're squatting right now. You're going to have to bring up your weak points even more. He goes, that's just the way you're at with your career.
Well, that comes into that final phase, that they entered into, where there's a skill of lifting 90% plus weights,
Absolutely.
right? Where max effort work can kind of do that, right? Just from a mental straining, learning how to just keep straining.
Yeah.
It can do that, but when it becomes mechanically too far away, then the transference is going to change.
Yeah.
Because of that. So it has to be similar. I'll even hesitate to say with a lot of lifters, even mechanically similar is too far removed if you're peaking for a meet, because it's not the same, as that skill of being able to grind through, on that one thing, where it can be a mind fuck, because what took them to get here isn't what's going to take them to get here.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's completely different than what it was here. So as you were working with them for that phase, what were some of the harder things that they had to grasp themselves? Because at that point, they should have a pretty good understanding of what's working for them and not working for them. So there's a two-way communication street that's way different than at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, then at that point, then you start really, it's not like I never introduced it, but I put more emphasis on actually teaching them about, with their nutrition and stuff, with their recovery methods. What are you doing outside of the weight room now? Not that I'd never mentioned that to them before, but it's like, now we're into, hey, you're getting advanced. You're getting on the world team now. What else are you doing besides this? Everybody else is training. Okay. Everybody else has good nutrition, decent nutrition. What else are you doing excellent wise? You guys need to start tracking this other stuff. You need to see where your weight's at with everything. You need to be able to look back at your training, like you said, Dave, and see what, they've gotten. You've been with me for a while. You need to look back and see what we've done. So we all might hit a similar exercise, maybe like, if we're doing a safety squat to a low box, for them to work on that part of the off season. I might have them break off and do different assistance work. I might have them say, hey, we're all going to hit this together, but I need you to do this. I need you to do this. And once they started learning kind of what they needed and how to push that stuff, that was a big part. Getting stronger. That was a big thing on assistance work. I see too many people now, man, they will go hard on the main lifts. And then I see them go to assistance work. I'm like, you're not even taxing anything over them. You're honestly just wasting your time. Where I push my kids, okay, we're done with this. And then it's on our priority list. What's the next thing we need to do? These are the things you need to go on. And we're pushing those, RPs hard on there. Maybe we're leaving a rep or so, but we are pushing those very hard. I think those last couple reps where you were struggling, that's where the strength comes in. And that's what separated them. Like, you really got to, not that I didn't push them before, but I put even more emphasis on that stuff during that time. You've got to bring up these assistance work. You've got to bring up these other exercises, and it will help some of your main lifts too.
Now, how are you determining what those lifts are? Is it based on bar path, but is it based upon what that lift looked like on that day? Or are you going based upon this is where you see the physical weakness?
Based upon where I see the physical weakness during that time, you know, where it's breaking down and where you need, you know, work at or something on that point. That's what I'm looking at for them. So a lot of them were kind of similar to what we would do, because I like the atmosphere of challenge. Like, hey, she's doing this. Hey, you're up next. You know, it's just like the old West Side ways. The weakest guy goes first, strongest guy, he gets to go last, and you just keep going through. And that's the way a powerlifting meet runs anyway. So I would push them on those assistance work, and I would pick those out for them, and they would know the emphasis, and they were getting results from it. So they understood, like, you know, the one summer, I can't believe how much back work I had them do. I'm like, you guys' backs are just weak. We spent all summer doing that, and they're like, man, every lift went through the roof.
How did you know that was what was weak?
They were just falling over on their deadlifts, Dave. They were getting too many rounded backs. We were getting out of position in our squats. Heavy benches, great setup, Dave. And then we come out and we would lose it. And I'm looking at this, I'm like, this isn't enough. You're only doing a few sets. And they didn't know that, but I'm like, we are going to increase this. These are the reasons why you guys are breaking down. So I can sit there and coach you all you want and give you every single cue. If you are not getting yourself stronger in those areas, it's not going to matter how good of a coach I am.
So when you attack that one, because lat work becomes a weird thing in a powerlifting sphere because nobody knows where to put it.
Yeah.
You know, I think I know what your answer is, but where do you put it, and what is the emphasis on that?
At that time, when it was a weakness, it was right on the priority list. You got done with your main lift, it was either the next thing or, you know, maybe two things right after that.
Every time they came in?
Every day, 4 days a week. And then if we ever had, like, we'd have a day where we come in and do ab work and everything. Louis used to make fun of my abs and made me do abs on an off day. So we come in and do ab work, and I'd make him do some extra upper back work. You know, your shoulders are going to get beat up a little bit from benching, so we might do some face pulls, but you know, some dumbbell cleans, an old West Side one. But we would do those, and we'd do those heavy and hard, and then we'd be done. We'd get that extra workout in quick and you know, finish it.
So those were from an effort standpoint, my brain intensity is a percentage of a 1 rep max. Okay. So let's just kind of put that there.
All right.
Effort would be the work that you're actually putting into something.
Yeah.
Most people I know from strength and conditioning kind of think that way, but bodybuilders' intensity is effort. It becomes convoluted.
Yeah.
So with the effort on the back work, if it's on that main day, that effort's obviously going to be high because it's up, higher prioritized. Yep. Now on the supplemental day, is that effort still just as high, or are you bringing it down a notch or two?
Maybe bringing it down a notch or two. I mean, we'd still maybe go heavy on this, but it's like, hey, you still got to, you know, train the next day, or hey, you still have a big lift coming up in 2 days. So I hate the word maintenance. We're still making some progress, but it was just like we were still pushing it, but not to the limit where it would tax them or would take away from something else that was going to happen tomorrow or 2 days from now.
Are the reps higher on that supplemental day compared to the main?
No, usually there might be more sets during that time. There might be more volume because let's be honest, you know, the standard, you know, out of the magazine, 4 or 5 sets, that's not going to do it for weakness. I'm sorry. You need about 8 or 9 sets, you know. One of my favorite quotes was from Bill Kazmaier when he talked about back work, and he talked about, you know, at Swiss, he was doing 34 sets, you know. It was just like that's how much he needed from all his pressing because his pecs were pulling everything forward. It wasn't 4 or 5 sets of 8's going to do it for you. So I've increased, you know, hey, we're doing, you know, 6, 7 sets, maybe 8 or 9 sets of this, extra warm-up sets, maybe a couple down sets, but just enough to tax them, but still have room that it wasn't going to affect anything else.
I think if people listening can think that one through a little bit, because they'll hear 8 or 9 sets, and if you're training it heavy. Right, we're not training this like a bodybuilder right now.
Yeah.
You know, we're not like peak contraction. There's still a full range. You're still training it optimally. Yeah. But you're trying to lift as much fucking weight as you can. Yeah. It's going to take a few sets for you to actually get to the point where you're going to be able to put that much effort into it. Yeah. Where I think when they hear the 8 or 9 sets, they're not all at that same effort. Yeah. Because you're not. I can't explain it because you have to feel it. You know what I'm saying? And I think people listening will get what we're saying. There's a certain set where you're like, okay, now this is actually the weight I want it to be. Yeah. It feels like it's supposed to be. The other ones felt a little kind of clusterfucky-ish. Yeah. So maybe it wasn't 8. I just did 6 or 5 because it's not where it needs to be yet. Yeah. I don't want to exhaust too much because these matter, you know, the later ones. Yeah. And then those get pushed hard where in another realm, the way that John Meadows would do a lot of his more high volume work is you have the warm up sets, but then here's the work sets. Yeah. Right. And normally if I'd see like 5 sets of 10, you know, they're not all hard. Right. Yeah. You figure the last 2 are going to be the hardest. Yeah. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is you get the main, you know, those sets need to be hard.
Yeah.
Those work ones, but you need to get to them first. Yeah. But if you're actually putting that effort in there, 9 would be fucking hard. Yeah. 9 would be really, really hard. Right. But that would take skill acquisition. Your work capacity would have to increase to be able, I see where you're going with this, right? Yep. Where it may not be 9 from the jump, but it's easier to add another set sometimes than it is to just keep chipping weight, especially if it's pull downs. Yeah. And even plate loaded, you're still, what, a dime? Yeah. Well, I guess you can do a 2. You know, there's kind of ways to do that. But am I correct? Am I thinking on how I'm trying to explain this?
I think it's just like if you're squatting from 135 to 500, you know, you have a bunch of sets leading up to those main hard sets, you know, the last few that are on there. That's exactly how I always wanted it, like a lifting meet where, you know, you're starting off, you know, your first one's to gain momentum. Second one, you know, your attempt is, you know, something maybe around a PR or so. Third one's the goal that you've been wanting to squat at that meet. I always want to do that. So even with my periodization that I was doing with them, it was starting off light. You got your warm-up sets and you got your sets, and then you got the main ones that you were trying to hit for that day. Yeah,
and then there's just the one movement.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so yeah, this I agree with you on 100% because I'd rather see that 8 high effort sets than 3 different movements.
Yeah.
You know, that maybe you get one really good high effort set out of each one of those 3.
Yeah.
You know, bodybuilding may be different, you know, but we're trying to zone in on a weak point.
Yes.
And you're trying to figure out what movement's going to best address this. And if you have 3 of them, how do you know which one did it?
Yeah.
You know, if you put the wrong one in there, you're going to know pretty quick.
Yeah.
Right. Because what I found with things like this is you start adding that in, even if it's on the extra day, you're going to start to see slight differences almost immediately. Just from an activation standpoint.
Yeah.
And if a couple of weeks go by and you haven't seen any difference, then A, maybe they're doing too much, but you know, so there is that. But B, maybe it's the wrong movement or they're not executing the movement properly.
Yeah.
You know, a pull down can be a reverse good morning. You know, if
you've seen that,
you know, in some ways.
Yeah.
So going through that with them there, at what point did you not have to work with them on strategic aspect and mental aspect of competing? Because when you get to that level, there's a whole other level that comes into play.
Yeah.
Where numbers do matter.
Yeah.
Were they allowed to pick their attempts? I mean, you go to the Worlds, this becomes a different thing sometimes.
Yeah. No, we would sit down when they got to the Worlds, they got to, you know, the national level, or if it was going after American record or world record, we would lay out a plan. But again, I get to make the changes on that. They had built that trust within me. So they knew.
So you can select that. There's not because years ago there was an assigned coach that basically was able to call.
Yeah.
You know, which was kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to. Did you have to deal with that?
No, when I went to the Worlds, I had a good respect from the coaching staff from everything that I had done.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of the older lifters or the coaches or the people on the committees and stuff knew, you know, who I was, and it wasn't really ever a problem to that point. They would just maybe want to know what our goal was, or they would kind of chime in, but they would usually let me kind of handle that because it was never a problem. But they would say, hey, you know, just letting you know she needs this for this, or she needs this for a bronze medal or a silver medal. So they would do that. But I had a good understanding with all the coaches that were doing that time. So I got to be, and they put me on the coaching staff too, Dave.
Okay.
So then it wasn't really, you know, a problem for them. And I always ended up, you know, maximizing their stuff and doing what we were supposed to do out there.
Okay. I always understood why it was there.
Yeah.
You know, I get that, but I would never want to be that fucker that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I don't think is that still in play now?
To a degree. You know, what I do at this level is when you start getting to nationals and worlds, obviously that's a whole nother federation and stuff that goes along with it. I think, again, if you work with them and you have an athlete on there, or at the time, since I had several athletes, they'd let me, you know, I was just on the coaching staff for the U.S., so I got to primarily handle those lifters. I might help out with some other stuff too. But those coaches were still around me. They were still like, you know, like I always needed a number person, which was good. So that way I could focus on my lifter. Yeah. Hey, give me my options. Let me know where we're at. Let me double check it. And then, you know, I'll send them out, put the number in and go.
No, I think that's first time I ever had that was at West Side.
Okay.
Thank God, you know, because now you don't have to worry about shit.
Yeah.
I learned the John Florio story. I kind of learned this the hard way because you knew John. We were talking about him a little bit last night, but I always kind of looked up to John because when I was a teenager competing, Louis would help me in the warm-up room.
Okay.
I mean, and John was another one that would always give me time, and talk to me and give me tips. And, Ed Cohn once, I told, showed me how to sumo deadlift in the warm-up room when I was like 15 or some shit like that, which was, oh my God. But all these other guys, would always, and I don't know why, it's just the kind of the cool thing with powerlifting, but John was one that probably more so than anybody else. And I always wanted to beat him, right? Yeah. And there was a meet in Toledo in, I can't remember what year it was, but we were in the same weight class and I was having a good meet. I'm like, holy fuck, and he was 275 for whatever reason. I don't know why, but I'm like, we're neck and neck. And then I outpull him for the win by 5 pounds or whatever it was. Yeah. And I'm so fucking happy, man. I'm like, fuck yeah, this is awesome. He's like, congratulate me. But he had this smirk, man. It was a weird fucking smirk, man. It's like, I don't understand all this. This is kind of weird. Yeah. But I've never been in a position like this before. Yeah. So when the best lifter award was announced, you see where I'm going here.
I was waiting for something.
Yeah, okay, he fucking got it. And I'm like, mother. Then he came over and he said, see, you thought you had me. Yeah. But you didn't. Yeah. And I'm like, motherfucker. Because I'm just,
you won
trying
the
to
battle,
put I won the battle, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to beat him so bad, but meanwhile, he had somebody working the numbers. He kind of knew exactly what it was. Yeah. I never worried about that shit before that. It was just like, here it is. And then once I got on the West Side, that, other people kind of took care of that, which it's good and bad, because this is kind of the reason why I hate the deadlift is because my deadlift always seemed to be, pull your opener, pass your second, see what you need, take the third, be able to do that. So there was never any chance I really pulled anything to really test, except for a meet I tore my pec on, and to test what that was, because I wasn't willing to risk, a third to be a fifth, or something like that. So it was always around that same fucking range. Yeah. So I'm like, the deadlift just became the thing that you do before you go to dinner, and it's kind of worked for me, but I wasn't a great deadlifter either. So that plays into that as well. Yeah. We're having somebody handle all that, especially now that coefficients and shit. Some meets now are just all.
You go to the Arnold now, Dave. Everything's about that. So when I go there, like you said, I have one or two of my main people that run numbers. Like my job, I love handling my lifters. We have that trust. Like I get them ready. I have somebody who, hey, we need this, or hey, they're in this place, or hey, here's your options for it. I want to pick the last thing, but I always have some great people in my corner that have helped me out through that time.
Does the USAPL now have the judging panel like the IPF does, to where you can overturn?
Yeah, so you'll have a jury at your national meets. Yeah, so they can overturn it. You still have to have at least you can't overturn 3 red lights.
Well, I know that. I know that. But now you need another dude.
Yeah.
Just to do that, because if I understood correctly, you can pay like $50 to try to overturn somebody that got 2 whites and a red.
Yeah, you can slap 100 on the meet and it stops the meet, and you can I get what you're saying. Yeah, you can do that for another lifter. Yeah. But you can like I've had lifters who I had to get one overturned at the Arnold. It was a good lift, and let's see, 2 out of 3 said no, and I went over and protested it, and the judges had seen what had happened. They said it ended up being a good lift. So you can protest your own. Yeah. If as long as you have one. Yeah. But then if another lifter there, you can put 100 down, stop the meet.
That's only for the deadlift, though, right? What's that? That they can protest another lifter. Is that only on the deadlift, or is that on any lift?
We've had some rules changes and stuff. I don't know if that has been any changes like further on that with what they've done.
Yeah, so I kind of like it, but I'd probably hate it if I was competing, but I kind of like it because it's a whole nother strategy aspect.
Yeah, but they stop the meet. I mean, it's a literal like stop the meet. Oh,
it stops it?
Yeah, 100. Yeah, when you put it down, they stop it, and the jury comes together, and there's a whole, thing they go through. I mean, it's a good organization. Like when they set that up, like, hey, no, like you do this, here's what happens, here's what we're going to do. And then they come through with a decision. Either you get it or you don't.
When I was watching, I think of this past year, the IPF World's live stream, they were able to do that, and that decision was made before the next lifter's lift was even completed. So I could see where that could be a huge clusterfuck. Yeah. You know, where it's delaying the meet. But all I thought during that whole time was, this is cool. Like, this is actually really cool.
Yeah.
This is now a whole nother strategy level beyond,
Yeah.
you know, just trying to filter out what you need to pull to place.
Yeah.
Now you got this shit going on, which brings the, I don't know how I really feel about it because I'm not the coach doing this.
Yeah.
You know, because how in the fuck do you manage all that with 5 lifters? And you see, this is a lot, man.
Yeah. It happened at the Arnold one year. We had a spotter, or I had a lifter. She was going up. It was slow, and it was starting to teeter-totter a little bit. And, you know, a spotter touched it too soon. And the side ref had seen it. So I went over and protested. I said, hey, go get her ready. I said, she might be up again. So I went over, protested. They saw it. They said it was, you know, the spotter had touched it. They put her at the back end of the order. She got to relift. So I had my coach calming her down. I'm like, hey, go do this. I took care of this. Hey, you're up in 5 minutes. Like, you better go out and get this lift now and make sure that nobody touches it. Nobody has a reason to touch it.
Yeah.
So we've had to do that before where, you know, you've had to protest it and then we got to relift too.
Yeah, man, that would be tough for an online coach to do, right?
Jeez, don't give me stuff.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Because it's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
How would you explain your training philosophy now?
Yeah.
You know, with lifters that you're working with. So it's, everybody evolves their own philosophy, but there's certain defining aspects that you can lay out to it to be able to define what it is. What would you say yours is?
Yeah, obviously a combination from everybody I've been around.
Yeah.
But I would say it's West Side influence where we have, you know, training cycles where we'll go for 3 or 4 weeks with the same lift, kind of building stuff up, and especially in the off season. I think that as we get towards, I use a progression with my lifters. You know, some lifters I can start up heavier because you have the 3 lifters, the ones that respond to intensity, the ones that respond to volume, and the ones that are a combination of both. So I like to work my lifters up as we go through. It's just setting goals every single week. So off season, Dave, I like a little bit of conjugate in there, but I pick certain exercises that they really need to work on. So if I have a lot of lifters now that they're getting really strong. I do a lot of reverse band deadlifts. That's really helped our lockouts throughout all there. We'll run tremendous cycles of those. And then I'll actually incorporate them even into their training block, like leading up to a meet. Because we might deadlift, and then your priority next one might be reverse band deadlift because you need to still keep working on that lockout, still not where I want it. But I think it's in the off season, you know, let's just say we're running a camber bar bench press. You know, if I have a lifter who's weak off their chest, I'll run that for about 3 or 4 weeks. I can really push it. Sometimes I'll cut off at 3. I've had stuff that's gone 5 weeks before. Where I've seen, hey, we're still making progress. Like, we're still bringing up your weak point. You still got room to grow on this. Same thing with their assistance work. I periodize that in the off season as well. Maybe we'll start with 8s the first week. Say we're doing tricep rollbacks. That's a staple exercise with us. 6s, 5s, maybe work to heavy 4s, and then we're going to switch everything else around on that position. As we get closer to a meet, I'm big on deadlifting the opposite stance in the off season. I think you need to work your weaknesses, but if people need more work, hey, I'm still not figured out sumo. It's what I pull. I would still do maybe some variations of that, like a close stance sumo, maybe an ultra wide or something. It's still giving them a little break because I always believe that you already know where your strengths are at. You got to work your weaknesses. You have to, and you got to do that all year round. Now, as we get towards a meet, we'll have Dave probably about a 3 week, like I call like an intro training block where, hey, we're working the competition lifts back in. You know, we're done with, you know, maybe some of the, I won't say off the wall exercises, but some that are not too closely related to what we need right now. We're going to work these back in. Now we're going to have a full, as long as I have a lifter that's in really good shape, that's been with me, that's brought up their weak points, we just need about a 5-week major prep, and I can send them the meet, and we've always had good success on that part.
All right, so your goal in the off season is basically to try to get that prep window as small as you can get it.
Yes.
Which is, I like that.
Yeah.
Because meets can beat you up. Longer prep cycles, and you know, this, you compete. I mean, the last 2 real heavy training days.
Yeah.
You know, you're dealing with some shit.
Yeah.
Where if you can avoid that at all costs.
Yeah.
I've always said the healthier lifter within 10% total will always win.
Yeah.
You know, because the other ones, everybody's going to go in still a little beat up. But if you can go in the least beat up, you can beat the stronger lifter just by the stupid shit. They're not going to be able to manage. Not stupid. It's part of the game. Yeah. But some people don't manage it as well. Yeah. As others. Yeah. Ego, you know, different things can kind of play into all that. Yeah. And you know, they forget what they're training for. Yes. You know, maxing for Instagram, for instance. You know,
this is one we're going to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, things like that, which can throw them off course. Yeah. You know, where when you're working with your lifters and you have more intimate personal contact, you can kind of help avoid that. Yeah. you know, and if anything, just throw fake plates on for Instagram because what matters is the meat, right?
Yeah.
So I'd rather somebody get called out for throwing a 15-pound 45 on. You shouldn't do it anyhow.
Yeah.
But the lesser of two evils, to me, is having a better meat than a better post.
Yeah.
Right.
Dave, that's where I think I see people start training cycles too heavy too soon. Or like you just said about the Instagram post, I see way too many people. And I had my kind of intermediate lifters would be like, man, well, this person's hitting PRs like in their lift. I'm like, just wait till the meet. But coach, they're hitting like a couple months out, they're PRing on this, or I just saw they had another 10-pound PR squat, and man, they're going up. I'm like, just wait till the meet, guys. And all those lifters that were setting those, my lifters, you know, slowly but surely were building up. And on meet day, like you just said, my lifters are healthier. You know, we're stronger. We really haven't missed lifts. We pushed it, and we've pushed the envelope the last couple of weeks hard. But then we still have just enough where we haven't peaked out for the, or we're peaking out for the meet. And we always do better on meet day with everything.
Yeah, I'll see a lot of different, especially over the past, when did online coaching really start taking off? So let's just say 7 years ago. I'm sure it was before that, but there's a point when it became like everybody has a coach now. Where I see, because I do like one person's program out here. That's it. Okay. And then as soon as I can flip them off to somebody else, they're going to go off to somebody else. Right.
Okay.
But it's just getting them to a point where technically everything solid, you know, to be able to do all that. Yeah. But I've seen a lot of different training methodologies and 3 times, because I can remember each one of these times very specifically. Say start of prep, which is always weird to me, right? Because it should all be prep, if it's, you know, but anyhow, and 12 weeks out, either it's always either been 5 sets of 3, 4 sets of 3, or 6 sets of 3. And in 3 different occasions at that 12-week out point, they're missing sets. And all I'm thinking to myself is, who the fuck is this coach? Yeah. Right? Because where do you go from here? Do you just like hope the drugs are going to catch up? Because even if that's the case, that's a lot of drugs. They got to do a lot of work that's not going to happen over that period of time. It's bewildering to me that they would be programmed to weight and number. Yeah. And it's not that hard for me to figure out, because I'll see it. Then you just go to open powerlifting. Like, what is this? What is the percent? Yeah. You know, the person hasn't had a meet in 2 years, and they're like, they just magically put 200 fucking pounds on a lift. Yeah. And this is like 90%. I mean, it's crazy as fuck, some of the things that I'll see from that. Yeah. Then on the flip side, I'll see some that I like way better, where it's like, you could have put a fucking 45 on each side of this thing. Yeah. You know, to be able to go through there, but I'm not sure I would say that's prep. Yeah. You know, it's just, this 12 week has just become this weird, like, defining prep time, and I don't really know what that really means. Yeah. But
I shake my head at the stuff. I'm like, where's this person going? Why are they starting? I'm like, you're 12 weeks out, and you're already maxing out, or like you said, you're missing, or that was a grinder already. Yeah. How are you going to sustain? Like, yeah. And where are you going to go from there? Yes. It makes no sense.
Yes. And if it was more conjugate based and say it's just flipping that main movement in as a max effort exercise to get in the 90% range, just to see kind of where you're at. Yeah. I can kinda understand that, kinda, based upon the experience of the lifter. Yeah. Right? Because what if it's not good? Yeah. Now you got a mental issue you're going to have to deal with. You see, I can kind of get it, but you should already kind of know where they're at just from the indicators that you were talking about earlier. Even with the kids that you're working with, you kind of got these benchmarks that let you know where everything is. Where, you know, Louis had the max, I guess we all had max effort exercises that kind of were benchmarks. Other ones really weren't. Yeah. But some were. And other ones could have been rep based. Like you mentioned your good morning at 405. As mine was at 365, 405 for 5s. I'm good. Yeah. That's where I need to be. Yeah. If it needs to not be that hard. Yeah. And there's a feel. It needs to feel like that. Yep. Good. There's no reason to go away. Now, if it feels too fucking hard, problem. Yeah. You know, but those are kind of like all sprinkled in there, which sounds like that's kind of what you're doing with the lifters that you're working with now. Yeah. Even now in the off season, you may correct me if I'm wrong, you're sprinkling in some new shit. Yeah. Just as different stimulus, but that could be something that may be a driver later. Yes. But you don't know for sure. Yeah. And you don't want to test that out 8 weeks out, right?
Yeah.
6
You stick
weeks
to your
out.
bread and butter at that point.
Yeah.
You should know, yes.
Yeah. So for your accessory movements, you know, I'll define a training day as like, here's the main movement, then there's supplemental, then there's accessories.
Yep.
So you're on the same page with that?
Yeah, we just do a priority list. Yeah.
Okay.
Number one's the
Okay.
main lift, and you prioritize everything else.
Yeah.
after
So
that.
for your supplemental movements, because accessories like side raises, shit, so it's a different type of thing.
Yeah.
What are the go-to supplemental movements that you have found have the best correspondence to the majority of the lifters? I'm choosing my words wisely, because it's not everybody all the time, but to the majority of the lifters that you're working with.
Yeah. So let's say you hit your main lift. We'll start with squat.
Yeah.
Okay, first thing to meet. I found my next list on that priority list is usually some type of a pause squat is my go-to with them. So they actually can sit in the hole, because you don't spend any time down there. And that's where most people, like you said, either you take the bar out wrong, because how you take the bar out is how you're going to lift the weight. Okay. That's always the number one. But I like to spend a lot of time down there with those guys, or I've had some people move the bar up higher with a closer stance. So again, your main lift squat, it's usually some type of pause squat or some type of, like I said, maybe a little bit higher bar, close stance on that position. Because I've seen some lifters who, you know, depends on their back position, their strength or weaknesses at. Bench pressing, Dave, you know, we do 2 benches a week. We have one on Thursday. But I'll give you an example. Monday, you might be hitting pinky on the rings, a little bit closer than that, not quite your competition grip that you go wider. Then you might be doing some really close grip benching. Thursday, you'll hit your main lift. You know, if you're going out index, legal wide grip on there. My go-to for that, a lot of my raw lifters lately, we've had some really good success, is a 2-position pause bench, where we're learning to pause on your chest one, bring it up an inch, pause again, and then press from there. Because a lot of raw lifters, if you don't get the weight off your chest, it's just too heavy. Simple as that.
Yeah.
A lot of them can at least get the weight going. They usually kind of fail here. I do have a couple that miss in the middle, but I love a 2-position pause where they're learning to stick it here and come up here. Because you'll see a lot of people, they'll collapse, they'll bring it up, they'll be moving. I'm like, you don't have any control of it. So what are you going to do with max weight?
Yeah.
And I had a couple of my lifters go through that actually at our last meet and had tremendous bench press success with that. That's not the only reason why. It was months and months off season work. But that was one of our go-to, was pause, bring it up an inch, pause again, show that you got that position, and then blast through that point at the top. That's been a good one for my raw benchers that we've done lately. Deadlifts, Dave, there's 2 things. You get your normal deadlift routine for the day. You know, let's just with some simple like a 5x5, 5x3 for the day. And then I either like a pause deadlift, where it's bringing up 1 inch off the ground for my lifters that their shoulders get over the bar. They can't quite get that position. The bar drifts away, especially from their supinated hand. You'll see a lot of lifters do that a little bit on that. So I'll teach them to pull it in, just pause it 1 inch off the ground, hold it, right? Not an Instagram pause, like a 1/1000, actually hold that position and then finish through the lift. Another good one that's been really good for us, as my lifters, again, have gotten stronger, they need to feel a little bit heavy weight, is we do a reverse band deadlift. I used to be a big person on rack pulls, and that used to help me out a lot personally, but they ended up beating me off a lot, like just beating my body up. So what I would do is just reverse band deadlifts. But I want the bar to actually come out the last 2 or 3 inches, so my lifters can actually feel the weight that they are actually going to be locking out. I think it puts them in a better position. The bands pull you straight up, so you can actually feel the weight coming up off the ground and actually lock it out and finish with heavier weights. So those have been kind of my go-to. If you had to ask me recently, that's been real well. My equip lifters, a little bit different on there. We do a lot of board presses with our bench shirts. That's great for the lockout. You know that. I mean, that's a big thing in the shirt that you need. We do a lot of, I'll do a lot of reverse bands with my equip lifters as well, my single ply lifters. That's always a good one for their deadlift. And then squatting, you know, we haven't done too much pause squats with the suits with everything. I'll just do a little bit more volume work, because a lot of them are getting used to the wraps and the suits in that position from there. So that's been the difference on my equip lifter side.
What about the dynamic work? Do you incorporate any of that, or is that out?
No, we're in the off season. I think if we've been handling some really heavier weights, once we start building that base back up, I want to build some speed back into the lift. So we will do some dynamic work more at the beginning type phase after a meet stuff. Let's get some speed back in there. But I've kind of gotten away from that and, you know, focus more, like I said, on some closely related stuff. It was just something that if you had to ask me, that was a go-to for me, speed, max effort work.
Yeah.
And my beginning lifters too, but then I saw like, hey, we need some more bench press actual work on there. So I started giving some bench press variations, and I've kind of gotten away from it, but I still mixed it into our training blocks.
What about the box squats?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we will use that in our off season. When I took the box out for mine, Dave, my deadlifts actually went down. So if you had to ask me, this was a benchmark for me, was to always box squat. So even though when I told you about my personal training, I had to squat in the suit and I had to get off the box. But before I would do my deadlifts routine, Dave, I would just do some simple dynamics, maybe 5 to 7 sets with a box, and that always seemed to help my deadlift out, and that was something that's staple with me. We do a lot of low box squats, a couple inches below parallel. I really believe that teaches them to sit, stay tight on the box. I don't do any rocking. I used to do that back and forth. Wade Hooper, good friend of mine, one of the tremendous IPF powerlifters of all time, great squatter. He squatted right around 820 at 181-pound body weight in a single ply suit. Wade was my roommate on several world teams. So Wade and he had fixed up my box squat, and that was something that had changed my mind to learn to sit and actually stay tight on the box before firing up. So that's something we'll use in the off season, a closer stance, low box. I mean, that was something that, Westside has written about for years, that you've talked about plenty of times. So we'll use that. If I see lifters that are getting too quad dominant and drifting too far forward with their knees, then I'll put them, when you ask me about how do I pick mine out, then I might put them on just a standard below parallel box and have them work that in the off season for a little bit. So I see okay, now you're back to where I need you to be.
How did you figure out, because that's one of the issues with the box that I see, is they're not maintaining enough tightness.
Yeah.
Where that's a tough one. I've tried to do it. I mean, it's a tough one to write about.
Yeah.
It's a tough one to explain, because if they're relaxing too much, that's where the rock comes in.
Yep.
Right. And you don't want to do that. And, some people just naturally do it. So they're kind of like outliers. We talked about Big Mike earlier. He was one that they just kind of naturally happened with all that, but he also had issues sometimes coming out of the hole.
Yeah.
Right. Because of that position there. So how do you teach them to stay, I would just say 60% tight, because it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
So how do you work that balance to be able to help them understand what you're looking for, so they're not just hovering on it either?
Yeah.
Because there's those two.
Yeah.
To me, it's not that big of a deal, but I've been doing it. You see, I've been doing it for 30 years.
Yeah,
so it's a tough one to explain.
Yeah. I think luckily I had a lot of my athletes early on. So when I taught them the box squat, I taught them the right way, the way I wanted to. So it was easy transition as we went through a body weight to a kettlebell to a barbell with weights on there, even if we're doing on a front squat or something too. So I think it was an easy transition for that. For me, it's just teaching them, I want them to be like a pause squat, just like you'd pause a bench press to stay nice and tight on a chest so you get a faster press call on a meet. Same thing on a box. I want you to sit and stay tight, almost like a pause squat. If I see him transferring too much weight, I said, see how you relax. You kind of just plopped on the box, you sat on it. I want this just like a pause squat where you're transferring just a little bit of your weight into the box and then firing up from there. So I think it just comes from daily coaching cues. And if I had them early on, they learned that position from the beginning.
Now, what do you do with their shin angle on a box? Because not all lifters are going to have parallel, knee to ankle, right?
Yeah.
And some might be, and if I look through real quick, it's like, and generalize, wraps sometimes will be stacked, but wraps sometimes might be midfoot. Sleeves actually come a little bit more forward depending on the stance. Wider stance is going to be back more, but sleeves sometimes are toe. When you have them box squat, do you have them shin angle parallel, or not parallel, but straight?
Yeah.
Or do you have them in the same shin angle that they would free squat in?
Yeah, I don't overcomplicate it. I want them to sit back onto their box. So actually we will overload the glutes and the hamstrings. So I will have them almost get to a vertical shin. But some of mine, their knees, as long as they don't go over the toes, they might be in line with it a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. But again, I'll see that more in their free squats when they're actually, competing, breaking below parallel. But we shoot for vertical shins or darn near closest.
So you're doing it for posterior chain. Because this was a question I asked Laura about as well.
Yeah.
Because she keeps them in, wide sit back, all for posterior chain, but then that's a supplemental, movement for them, because that's where I think a lot of the box squats don't work. Kind of came into the fold as they would train that as their main movement. Yeah. And train 90% like that. And then when they went to their competitive squat, it's a fucking disaster because they lost the movement pattern. They don't really know what they're doing. Where, one answer is just match the shin angle. The other answer is just get rid of the box, which is what most did. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, box squats don't work. And then the third is use it as, what it's intended for. Yeah. To develop that posterior chain, which will have more carryover, obviously, to gear, because you're going to get back Well, single ply, you're going to get back into the gear.
Yeah.
Multiply, it's more of a plie anymore. You don't really sit back.
Okay.
You know, the way that works, you can't. You know, it's too restrictive. So it's a little bit different with how that works.
We do, Dave, in the off season, if we're doing a lower box, like more than just below parallel, we will bring the stance in, and you have your knees come over toes a little bit. But that has a position. I've had some lifters who have gotten tremendous gains when going into their training cycle from a low box squat with a closer stance because it worked their weakness. Just like you'll have a lot of lifters who you bring your close grip up, man, your wide grip's going to go up. Big transfer on that part that I've seen, and it helped a lot of lifters with. Yeah,
we put the low box safety squat bar in, not really for the squat, for the deadlift.
Yep.
Because it's if you look at it real close mechanically, it's really damn similar to what that deadlift would be.
Yeah.
With mindset with your lifters, what are some commonalities that you've seen with? Because you've been to meets helping lifters too, you know, top lifters.
Yeah.
What do you think is some of the what separates mindset wise the top lifters that you've worked with and coached in meets to the ones that aren't as successful?
Yeah. I think it's the old hero and the coward situation. They're both scared of, you know, certain things, but it's what the person does to go out and do it actually at the meet. I think when a lot of my advanced lifters now that I've gotten, because before I had to build all my lifters, now I'm attracted more like good lifters, which is kind of neat. It's a new challenge for me because now I'm getting some really good lifters, national world ranked, who are already coming in like that. And now I'm getting them a little bit better still. So I think the big part, the mentality wise, is those people can go through when you have those doubts. When you mentioned about, man, the last couple of weeks when weights are not feeling good, they're not moving where you're supposed to, you thought you'd be at a certain point. My lifters are able to, okay, well then I got this for the day. Hey, here's a positive thing for the day. Hey, I still hit this for the day. We're still going to do good on meet. Hey, that's okay. You know what? I was wanting to hit this. That's only 5 or 10 pounds away. I'll be able to get that at the meet. So I think it's just a mentality. I think it's the experience. I think it's when they've set a goal, like when I talk to my lifters and if they're talking about a lot of other stuff, like the main ones I've seen are like, hey, well, they'll always bring it back to their training. Hey, they'll talk, somehow their training will kind of pop up in a conversation. So I just see that focus, like, man, that's what I had, that's what they have. So I think it's a lot of combination thing, but I think it's about what they do, how they handle certain situations, because there's going to be doubt. And I've had high level lifters that, man, this hasn't been going right the last couple of weeks, or man, I'm having trouble with this, or hey, this is still bothering me. You know, I'm like, well, here's what we need to do to fix it. Here's what you need to do to get back on track. Make sure you get it done. And they'll go after it. And, hey, I got everything done. Hey, that is feeling a little bit better. Hey, you know what? I was only off from this. I'm good. I'm good to go.
Because you have better lifters coming to you now, which, as you said, creates a different circumstance where I saw that with Louis when I was there, because he had, before I came in, like 70 elite totals just from Columbus, you know, and they all came in average lifters or below average lifters. So it's a different type of loyalty and trust, you know, that's kind of developed from that to when they come in. And I was when they come in already with elite totals, the buy-in's my buy-in wasn't really there at all. It took a year or so to be able to change that. And then he would start bringing in other lifters, and I would see, you know, I remember having a conversation with him beforehand, actually saying, "Are you really sure you want to do this?
You want to go down that road?" Yeah.
Yeah, because if they're coming in and they're on upswing, you know, it's all good. Yeah. They're not coming here out of desperation.
No.
You know, so they're coming here thinking they already got this shit all figured out, and where we were doing is vastly different. Yeah. Than what they were doing. Yeah. So it's vastly no, you're not going to put your gear onto the meet. I mean, all kinds of just vastly different. Yeah. Because this is an animal that you really want to take on. And I saw the challenges that came with that. And there's a lot of good too. So it's equally balanced. Yeah. But it's different. Yeah. It's totally different. Yeah. So when they're coming to you, is it because they've exhausted other measures? And because that's going to be a different type of person than the person that's just killing it to begin with. And then with that, how do you go about the communication to be able to get the buy-in for what you want them to do, or you just try to get them to buy in a little bit and build off of that? Yeah. Because Louis there was no buy-in a little bit. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So it was a different thing, but they could always just fucking leave. So he had, you know, that it was different. There was really, and if you moved here, there was nowhere else to go either. So it was either this or you're done. Yeah. over the years that changed because other gyms started to pop up. So then there became options.
Yeah.
So it was easier for people just to rotate out, go someplace else.
Yeah.
It's easier for the lifters that are coming to you just to say, fuck it, I'm going to go someplace else. So how do you manipulate? How do you not manipulate? Well, it is kind of somewhat manipulation and influence, but, but how do you manage that?
Yeah, I think lifters come to me for a couple of reasons. Number one is I think I'm known as a really good technical coach, and you'll see that on my lifters from the national scene to when we're at the Worlds. That's one thing I've gotten from foreign coaches, which is obviously a high compliment because anybody can have a strong lifter. But when you get somebody who you've developed strong and who's technically sound too, then you've had a good coaching behind that. So I think people see that with that. I think the other thing that I've had a lot of people, and I don't realize this sometimes and I forget about it, is just the atmosphere when you come in and train with us. When I have my lifters around, like my really good ones, and we're all training together, everybody's focused. And I have other lifters who've come in like, man, like I've never been to a gym, or it's been a while, or man, I haven't seen this before, or nobody's messing around. They'll do that before or after or something like that when we're done. That's a whole other mentality.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing was the culture. And I was like, really, it's one of those surprising. This is just the way we train. This is the way I grew up training. This is the way I learned how to train. This is what I demand. So I see that. So I think those are the two big ones. And then obviously the results that we're still getting, with the other lifters. And then I had a couple who came to me who were pretty good, and I made them really good. And now I've had some elite level that have come to me that are still getting better. So I think it's a kind of a draw and a buy-in from that. And I think, Dave, the highest compliment you get is, somebody recommending you. So I've had a lot of recommendations from my own athletes, like, hey, I got this other lifter. Hey, this person's interested. I'm getting good results. They want to see it. So I think that's happened. With my lifters, as far as what you said with the buy-in, a lot of these ones that have come in, some have changed completely, mostly to my way, but I still meet them. Some people, one of my lifters want a little bit more volume on squats. Hey, that's always worked for me. I'm like, okay, here's what I need you to do. Here's how I'm going to work with you. So we're good on that. Yeah, I'm good with that. That's good for me. So I've worked with that. Others, like I said, have changed completely. Others I've had to meet in the middle. I'm like, hey, this is what you're doing, but you're going to go down this road and you're going to end up messed up. You're already plateauing on stuff. I said, you need to change these ways on these certain things. So keep doing this, but I need you to switch this up. Well, here, you got to meet me in the middle. And again, I think the number one thing is when you get those people results, when they went through a training cycle, oh, wow, I actually wasn't, banged up. Hey, this was great all the way through. Hey, I hit my PRs. Oh, I've been trying to get this for the last couple of years. I finally got it. Or, hey, I'm on the road to hitting something good. We're building momentum. So I think meeting some of those in the middle. So it's a combination. It's not just my way. Some lifters I do, some I meet in the middle, or some I sprinkle a little bit of what they've done in. So they're still, okay, this is great. I like what you're doing. I still get to hit a little bit of mine. So this is perfect for me.
To the lifters that are listening to this, that are working with a coach, the one point that I'll make out there is communicate it, because the ones that you're kind of meeting, say they want higher volume in the squats, you need to know that, because you can build that in, but you're going to have to take something else out to be able to do that. If they just do it, but they don't tell you, then, they're going to end up overreaching because of that lack of communication. Because I think what happens many times is that's what they do. They just do it, but then they don't have that communication. And then it burns out later. And then it's your fault. And it could have been managed. Just with that communication with. Now you also have online lifters that you work with. How often, because you have online clients you work with, but at the same time, a lot of them will come spend time with you during training blocks. So how often, what's the least amount that they could come be with you personally to yield results?
I don't think there's a real good answer for that. I want them there as much as they can.
I know. That's why I'm asking that.
I I have, HPT training weekends. I hold those probably about 4 a year. So, the minimum they got to come in for those if they're really out of state somewhere. But most of my dedicated lifters, they've driven out here. They've driven up, with me, or when they're getting ready for a meet, they'll make the sacrifice. They'll have everything ready. So as soon as they're done with work, they popped in the car, they're drinking their shake on the way here. They're ready to get out and get going with it. So, the minimum is you got to at least come in, at least 4 or 5 times a year to train with us, with everything, and spend the whole weekend on that. The better off you can get in here, the better off it's going to be for my online. But it's, again, like you just talked about, it's about communication. Like I check in with them. Like I try to make it as personal as possible, not just, here's your numbers, write some comments and I'll take a look at some videos. Like, nah, you got to go above and beyond. It's like you're training. I treat my, just like how I train, I treat it like I do with coaching, just got to go above and beyond. And that's why my lifters, stay with me, and that's why they get good results.
for lack of being able to put this more tactfully, your online presence sucks compared to other coaches, but yet you have way more clients, right? And way better results than what the other coaches have, right? So when there's lifters that are looking for coaches, right, what I will put out there is look for the results, not the impressions, right? Because from what I've seen, there's a vast difference, between those two things. Right. And, but you're in a weird space, with that, so are you trying to build the online base, or are you good with what it is?
Yeah. You know what, as I've gotten further, I've had more and more people reach out, not just powerlifters, but competitive athletes and stuff too. That's kind of taken off on its own. And I just kind of let it build for a little bit. And then, then I've brought in some assistant coaches that have been my lifters for years that I trust. And that's kind of built up. And, now I've even had some teams approach me about some stuff too. So, we're looking towards the future, and it's like, well, what's the next step? And I've reached out to, some other coaches. I had a great talk with Zach Evanesh. We were talking about, online coaching and how that works for large groups of people that you start dealing with, because it's, hey, what's the next platform that I'm going to do with? So, I'm excited for the future. I'm excited to get more lifters reaching out to me, more teams. I love my athletes. I got a wrestler right now. We're training for the Olympics. He just beat the former 2021 Olympian. He comes in, once every couple months. I send him back out, just with his training schedule and everything. So I'm excited to see this grow, and I'm going to start pushing towards this more.
Because we didn't get into that too much, because you do work with all the other sport athletes as well.
Yeah.
How much different is that training compared to the powerlifting? Granted, yes, it's different. I'm going to put that out there, but the base of it all, is it pretty close?
I would say the base and the philosophy is pretty close. It's just more like, hey, what are you doing at practice? How much are you running right now? How much are you jumping? We just had the triple jump NAIA national champion and All-American high jumper with me. And again, she was just telling me about what they're doing at practice, when they have certain breaks, when the coaches are having less time down. I'm like, okay, we'll do this. If anything bothers them, hey, especially with track athletes, their knees and stuff, my hurdlers and stuff that come in. So it's really just, again, talk with them, not knowing what's going on at practice, or a coach might have done this differently. Hey, we're switching this up, or hey, I got this big meet, or hey, I'm not worried about this. I want to train through this one. So it's really goes back to talk with them, seeing what they have going on and what I can and can't do. Obviously, my track runners, I can't train heavy and hard hamstrings, during the time. I can pick little things to keep them going, or when they have a break, then I'll hit those things hard. Those are very delicate during the track season, but I've kept a lot of those athletes healthier. I've kept them stronger by the end, and they've done very well. So I think it's really talking about them. My wrestler, he tells me when, hey, we got this going on, or hey, I got this training camp at the Olympic Training Center coming up, or hey, he goes, hey, I'm going to be competing over in Europe for a couple weeks. We find out what they can do, what facilities they have, and we just kind of, work around it. He goes, hey, I'm going to be training twice a day for the next week. I said, well, hey, I'm going to beat you up with lifting before you leave, because you're not going to be able to be doing much lifting when you go out there. So, hey, here's my plan up until then. Next couple of weeks is going to be hard. Deal with it for now, because then you're not going to be training for a while, and that's detrimental to you. So just talk with them, seeing their practice plans, and making the best thing that we're both on the same page, and the athletes are very receptive with it.
The education space has changed, because you've been coaching for almost 2 decades. I don't want to age you that much, but for almost 2 decades. So the way that you went about acquiring education outside of just your own training yourself, which is a main pillar, which we already discussed. Yeah. If you were coming up now, right? So debatable if college isn't necessary, so we'll set that aside. But no, actually, I'll lean into that a little bit, because that's become a conversation of, is it necessary, is it not necessary? It's become more prevalent because it's more expensive, and all this. So that does play into that. But one thing that I think that a lot of people miss when they have that conversation, because they'll point and say, well, this person didn't go to college, this person didn't go to college, or say you didn't go to college, you're in the same spot that he didn't go to college, so I don't need to go to college. And I'm not going to say that they're wrong, right? But what I think they miss is the amount of studying and time that they spent acquiring their knowledge outside of college. Because what you learned in college, you probably don't really even use.
Correct.
Very little.
Very little,
right?
Yes.
The way I explained my college degree is it gave me a bullshit detector that was a little bit better than what I would have had otherwise. It's easier for me to spot the bullshit. Yeah. But I could have learned all that on YouTube at this point. The main skill set was self-study meeting other people,
Yes.
speaking to other people, knowing my bias, being able to listen to people outside of my bias, with understanding of what it is. And so all those kind of still come into play. But what I think a lot of these people miss is they think if they don't go, they don't have to deep dive into all these different subjects. They just think they just start in doing it. Where my argument would be the successful coaches that are out there, or even entrepreneurs that are out there, probably acquired more knowledge outside of college than anybody who's ever gone to college, right? Because it's the passion, it's all you ever do, right? So, for years, you've been in the trenches, but you basically are living strength and conditioning from the time you wake up till the time you go to bed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Unless you're chilling out with a girlfriend, watching a movie. But even then, you're still thinking strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't want to admit it, but yeah.
It's always there, but I want to make sure that I harp on that point that you can go the non-college route, but you're going to have to study way more than anybody thinks they need to. Yeah. It's not just, hey bro, what should I do? But then you take that and then you implement it with everybody across the board. So to get back to my question, if you were coming up now, today, what would your knowledge, knowing what you know now too, so we'll put that in there. So it's not like you're naive 18-year-old that just loves to lift fucking weights, right? You know what you know now. How would you go about acquiring the knowledge to be the best coach that you could be in today's world? Yeah, in today's world, I see still people, and this is when I talk to my interns that come in. All right, I'm glad that they've learned or they've asked questions and they've seen stuff, what about this or what about this? But they don't go see stuff enough directly. They won't reach out enough directly, or they won't go visit. They won't spend a day on stuff. And I make my interns, which I've had some really good ones in the past and some that, they just needed work. They don't understand the value of connecting with somebody, of going and seeing a program, of going back with questions, going back to that person over and over again. When they see you're dedicated, a lot of people do that. Louis didn't do much until like the 5th time, and he saw like, hey, wow, this kid actually is coming down. Wow, he's spending his fall breaks down here. Wow, he actually is stronger now. He's actually pulling 700. Okay, there's something to it. I think whenever I've called anybody and really showed how dedicated it was and actually showed up the next day, when I showed up at Vincenello's when I didn't know anything about speed, and I'm calling Lee Taft, I'm in his garage, the next day because he just moved to Indianapolis. I think that they don't go to a lot of those enough on there. And then even coaches at my level, I'll see them, they just won't go out. They won't ask other stuff. People are like, why are you always listening? Like, you're never really talking much about. I'm like, I already know what I know. I want to hear what somebody else is doing or anything. I had a lifter, Dave, when you had the VIP stuff after Swiss. Mary Jane, one of my top lifters over here. I had Ed. I'm like, Ed. Ed came in. He's got about an hour before I leave for the airport. I had him go coach her the entire time. I'm asking him questions about stuff. I'm telling her, I'm like, you go ask him. Like, and I was learning from that still. Like, oh, there's some stuff that I didn't see or didn't maybe know how to articulate to her. She goes, oh, that makes a little bit more sense the way he kind of said it over here. Or she goes, I understand what you guys are both saying now. This makes even more sense. So I think it still goes back to the visiting and volunteering. When I had people that didn't know about Olympic lifts, I'd send them up to Mark Garrett, who's a great high school strength coach in Crown Point, Indiana. They would learn all their stuff from there. When I had interns that needed to learn that stuff or needed exposed to him, like, you need to go spend days with him. And those that actually did it came back with more of a tremendous base than anything else I've seen. So. What was your, because there's two ways to go about doing this, right? Because I lived that same life, did the same thing. Yeah. Where it's easier for people to work with people personally than most realize it is. Yeah. But it's also in the approach and how they do it that's going to make a difference here, right? Because I'm sure you have people reach out to you now and you're like, no. Right. It's just the way that the message was formatted, what was written in there, and it's just like, no, they're not interested in learning, and Louis, as you said, basically kind of just fucking ignored you until he saw that there's potential or little drops, here and here until they realize, okay, now, we'll go in, with that, where with, what was your approach with that, because say the first time you went in to see Louis, you could have just said, well, fuck it, I'm, this is a waste of my time.
Yeah.
So how did you set up your approach with each of these people to actually get through the door?
Yeah. I think
well, let me step back a minute. I think it's easier today than it was then.
Yeah.
Right. But you still had to have the right approach to be able to get in.
Yeah. I think a lot came from some recommendations, maybe somebody who knew somebody who would call ahead of time for me.
Yeah.
When I got to be with the Cleveland Browns, Louis had called up, Milo at the time, and I got to go in there and just, volunteer and just be around all that stuff, because Louis saw that I was a hard worker. Marcus, when he recommended me to come down to Louis, Marcus saw that I was busting my ass for him and that I wasn't going to screw around, that I was serious about this. And I kept bothering Marcus over and over because he trained down here for a long time with you guys. So I think it was just, if you can get in with somebody like that and recommend somebody, because now I have other coaches that recommend, like, no, this is going to be a good intern.
Yeah.
This kid, he doesn't have experience, but he's going to work his butt off. He'll ask questions. He'll stay late. And as soon as I get that from somebody that I trust, I think that's good. So I think for younger people on that part, if you're doing a great job, if you are doing work and you're connecting with somebody and you're going above and beyond, that speaks more highly than that. Because we have our circle of, like, we'll recommend, like, I'll have lifters like, no, Jeremy, this is going to be a good lifter. I've had some other high schools contact, no, I don't know what to do with this kid. They're not going to screw you over. They're going to come down and work hard for you. If that's a trusted person, send them in. So I think the best thing you can do is work your butt off, go above and beyond, really show that you are dedicated, and people will talk and people will help you out.
Yeah, and build your network.
Yes. Oh, yeah, tremendously. Yeah, because we have our own, like in Indiana, where we kept everybody, like, we had our small little network where we'd recommend only certain people, and we'd say, no, this one's going to be good. And it was almost always an in at that point.
Yeah. Okay. That answered my question better than what I thought it would be. That's the missing component.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to
finagle
in my own brain. That's why I asked it out there, because if they do that, then they have that in.
Yep.
Because there's certain people that would message me or anybody and be like, oh yeah, sure, have them come out.
Yeah.
Other would get these long ass messages on how they're going to break all-time world records and all this other kind of shit. And it's just like, that's probably not going to work.
Yeah.
Were there any other topics that you wanted to go over that I didn't bring up?
No, we had, I was real proud, I guess, of bringing those lifters up. We talked about, being a good coach. I think I was able to really produce a lot of good people coming from my little town where I was at with everything. Those people had great success, and that fed into others and others and others, which has been great for me today, because now I have more and more people, seeking out training, coming in and seeing me. It's been great. I got away from the equip for a while, Dave, when the Raw came through. And then it's been kind of a neat challenge to get back into some of my equip lifters. And then all of a sudden I've had a flurry of those coming in, because we've had some really good results with that. So, as far as just with the different topics, I just like how we covered that. I like seeing your perspective, hearing about yours, even yesterday when you and I were just talking about stuff, and just hearing about some of your stuff, with Dr. Mel Siff, and how you navigated through training and how you picked up certain things from him and just from some different areas. It was kind of a great refresher of, like, even some stuff I didn't even know about that people you had trained with and gotten stuff to help build up your philosophy. So I think it was something I always mirrored mine off was going after other people and kind of bringing my philosophy together over here.
I have a note here for a topic that with peaking strategy with Usain Bolt.
What's that?
With Usain Bolt. So that was one of the topics that I think that you sent.
Yeah, one of my lifters, we always talk about that. It's like when people, when we talk about the Instagram people who just max out, it's like, well, I just want to hit I just want to see where I'm at with everything. I said, you don't do that. You don't just go up to Usain Bolt and say, hey, I want to see you run a world record today. Like, that is training, that is preparation, that is training cycles leading up to there, up into the Olympics and peaking at the Olympics. And that's the way I've always looked at mine, where we don't hit, like, we'll hit PRs and stuff in training, but a lot of our PRs and a lot of our results come actually at the meets. Where lifters are like, well, we're making small gains or we're doing this stuff, but I keep building so much momentum for them. It's always there. And that's something I always remind my lifters, like, you just don't go in and max out or just try to do this, or, I want to see where I'm at, or, hey, you are making progress. You're still building momentum. You're here right now, but where are you going to be at? Like we said, if you got a conditioned athlete in 5 weeks, that's where I want you to peak out the most. And that's where we've done a really good job consistently over a long period of time with these athletes.
Yeah, there was actually, now that you mentioned Mel, I think this was even in super training. One of the conversations I had with him was distinguishing the difference between a training max and a competitive max.
Yeah.
And then what that percent differential should actually be.
Yeah.
And I think Chad Wesley Smith is probably one of the highest I've ever seen, because it was like 15%. I mean, it was huge that he was able to pull. Mine was 10%, but there's gear. So, and when you don't, so there's that factor in there.
Yeah.
But I think that when you harp down on that, and they're intermediate or advanced, right? Sometimes a beginner is going to, have to max out. It's different, right, on what that's going to be. I think they should really, really harp down and focus on trying to have a decent, 5-10% variance, because it should be there, right? Because you were peaking, right? And then it's supposed to super compensate for that peak.
Yeah.
If it didn't, then what the fuck did you peak for?
Yeah.
But the beginners don't have the confidence. So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the thing there, where the more advanced has the confidence.
Yeah.
And sometimes that differential will be way bigger than you think if you have to pull a deadlift to be able to win.
Yeah.
Sometimes, it can be 50-pound PR or whatever the fuck, I'm sure you have as well. It's just crazy shit that people pull out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Now if you were to look at that and then go look at their training and break down all the percents, there's a pretty big differential there.
Yeah.
Staying on that though, what's from a competitive story, what's an example of something like that you've seen to where somebody, a train wreck opener, but then ends up pulling a all-time PR or world record or something like that?
Yeah, that's happened to several of my lifters. I think the deadlift, I think I just kind of passed that down to them. That was like an expectation that I gave them. A couple of them come to mind. Most recent one was Shelby Miles, who's Shelby Morris now. We were only planning what she needed was, in the 480s at most. And we were at the USA Powerlifting Nationals again. No more college division, no more junior division, open division here. Time to place, time to step up. And after it all came said and through, she had to pull 501, which was not on our training, which was not even talked about. It's one of those, like, that's a goal later on. But we put her in a position, I'm like, it's either you're going to place or you're not even going to. So, it wasn't like I'm like, I just throw it on there. No, like, she was looking good. Like, warm-ups were okay. Then first was better. And second looked really good. And then another girl pulled a lift. I'm like, all right. So I put the number in for 501. She went out there and smoked it. It looked like she could have done a double with it. And it was the most ridiculous pull I've ever seen from her. And it was just like, because we put her in a position where she got backed in, it was one of her goals to do that. She didn't care what was on the bar, and she was going to pull that weight no matter what. I think the other one was Jenica Baldridge, 2019. They had the Collegiate Nationals here in Columbus. Ohio State ended up holding it. Had over 1,000 lifters. She had just got done taking a final. Plane rides were all messed up, everything coming out. She was a little 138-pounder. And it came down to her last pull. And again, we gave her a PR. It was an American record. It was to win the entire meet by half a kilo. And it was to set the national record. And she was going to be the first female national champion in any sport at Brigham Young University. And they've had a powerlifting club on and off for since the 1980s is what I heard last. And she went out there and set the, deadlift 410, I think is what the actual weight was, at 138-pound body weight raw. Pulled that. I mean, it was a 100% max lift all the way through. But again, we had talked maybe around a 400, but it was what she got backed into a corner with and what she needed to. And she wanted to quit several times during that training cycle. Deadlifts were going terrible, Dave. I mean, it was like, we're just hoping, I kept her confidence up, but I was thinking like a 380 something, hey, we're going to fight for it, see what we need. But again, we had to back her off a little bit. I actually backed her weights down more than ever before, and I said, hey, I just need you to hit this, or hey, I just need you to hit this weight, where usually you're up at a second attempt or going close to a third in your training. We're actually just going to be hitting this. This is because this is where you're at, and this is what we needed to back her down. And she went out there and pulled that and became the first national champion in university history, and the first female at Brigham Young to win a national title in anything. Yeah. So those were the big deadlift ones that come to mind. And I think my personal one, since Gabe Daniels, I had an injury going into mine, and I wasn't even going to go out in 2008. And this is a story about quitting. And Gabe had, I was like, man, I can't even pull an opener. I'm supposed to pull this. Like, I'm not even going to place out there. And I mean, Gabe, if you know him, he kind of read me my rights right then and there. And basically, it's like, you're sitting there as a coach and you're telling your athletes not to quit and go through adversity and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, and you're telling me this? I mean, it was almost like your wrestling coach giving you a smack across the chest, like, man up. Yeah. So I went out there and we ended up, tying my all-time PR when I was even supposed to do that, skipping a second attempt, jumping 90 pounds, winning nationals, going on the IPF Worlds, winning the gold medal there, and then going on to World Games simply because of training was going terrible. I had an injury going into it. Stuff was not going right at all. It wasn't even close to even an opener. And somehow we ended up pulling that because I got backed into a corner, and it was either that or nothing.
Yeah.
So
there's a topic I want to revisit before we close this down, because I think some people will be surprised by this, but with the younger lifters that I've had come through for decades, I always have tried to push them, into, and I'm not federation biased at all, but I've always tried to push them into the USAPL because I want them to stay drug free for as long as they possibly can. Actually, when John Hack was out, he was speaking to one of the younger lifters out here, and I just put him on the line and said, at what age do you think this kid, if he's considering going on, should go on? Said 25, which was actually older than what I thought he was going to say. So it's a tricky question sometimes when you ask people that, and John's a great person to actually give that advice, because coming up through, was it USAPL? Yeah, it had to be USAPL at the time.
Started
IPF,
USAPL,
And where I try to push them there for several reasons. I'm going to have you expand on it because you're more part of it and came way more part of it than I came up through the USPF, right? So basically what ended up splitting and being the ADFPA and the APF and all that stuff. So, but the reason I push them there is to put them in a drug tested environment to keep them clean longer, right? The pushback is the meets are boring, they're silent and whatever. But kid doesn't know that. You know what I'm saying? They don't know that they can go over here and there's heavy metal, thrash music and all this other kind of shit. But that's one of the others. The other reason is I want the strictest judging possible because you can always go looser in different federations. You can't, it's hard to go the other way to be able to do that. And the competitiveness, right? To where we talked about it a little bit earlier, it's easier to jump in, any meet and place in the top 3 if there's really nobody in there. But when it's a stacked class, especially in today's world, because there are so many federations, we used to be able to just look at Powerlifting USA top 100 and say, oh, fuck, I'm 85. I'd like to be like 50, or just move up because there was like a little white line, there was a white space. I want to go to the next white space.
Back in Powerlifting USA magazine.
You could, so it's like just chipping up through that, so it gave you quantifiable goals to be able to kind of get through. Where I've always seen that more in that USAPL because now you got that drug tested thing, which fulfills that one goal. Then you have more competition to where you go, you compete, you may not be in the top 3. But if it's a state meet, each year that state meet's going to still have a lot of people. Where other federations, a state meet one year might have 6, the next year I'll give them benefit of the doubt 15, then the next year like 2. And then it loses its appeal, right? Especially somebody just out of high school, they kind of understand state. Hey, we won state. That's a big fucking deal, right? It's already kind of ingrained. Even if they didn't play sports, they know what it means. So to go to state, which is kind of easy. I mean, you can just go, right? That's fine. So that's there's bragging rights there, but then to be able to actually place and kind of move through there. But I've been very unsuccessful in that, because a lot of the lifters here don't lift in those federations where you're here. So it's easier to say, talk to him and then kind of go that route, but, and going back, that's how you came up. Right. So I came up more APF. So people are going to be somewhat loyal because of all that. But over the years, you start to become unloyal to federations because they all are fucking corrupt and a mess and all this other kind of stuff. But they're still quantifying ways to move up. That makes How would you explain that to somebody getting into the sport now?
You think of it more of a high school lifter now, Dave?
A high school lifter, or even somebody that's out of high school that's just starting, because I think they should all start there. I really do. And then they can move off into the other things. Fine, but at least start there. What would be your benefits? There's going to be some bias, and I want that. What would be your benefits as to why they should start in? Well, I guess it is just that USPA maybe could kind of fall is on even territory with that. I don't know about the depth though when you're dealing with state meets with them. So that's my only hang up. Nationals and stuff like that, I'm sure are stacked, with that, but at a state level. So what would be your benefit? What would be your list?
Yeah, I think at the younger level, Dave, obviously you have the state meets and stuff and the raw powerlifting, which, has grown tremendously. But I think when you take a kid, when I first took my kids to high school nationals, and they looked around and they see people and everybody from all these different teams, all these different states, and you see, like, I got a good friend in Louisiana right now. They purposely, in Wisconsin, they purposely peak their high school state meets for the USA Powerlifting high school nationals. Like, they have it at certain times so they can have a down week, ram it back up, and then go to high school nationals and peak again. So talking to all my lifters, when they've gone through, they look around, they see, man, I got 20-some, I got 30-some, 40-some kids in a weight class over here. Like, holy cow, it's like, where did all these people come from? It gives them like a whole new perspective. And then they see like all these coaches from all these different areas and stuff that are out there. It's like, man, this high school team or this team from over here, you got this team coming out, and these people brought Neenah, Wisconsin. I mean, geez, they'll bring 40, 50 lifters sometimes these high school meets. It's like they just bring a whole racket of people down here that have qualified. So I think it's like getting exposed to this and seeing like, man, this is way bigger than what I thought. Or, hey, like you said, hey, I'm top here. I keep winning the state meet. Or, hey, I win this local meet all the time. You get out with the high school nationals and you see some of these kids who are, not just powerlifters, maybe they're tremendous athletes. Like, hey, this kid's already going Division I football. This kid's going Division I over here. But I think seeing that, my athletes have said, man, seeing all these people from different areas, seeing how strong these people are, seeing that, holy cow, I can actually place with these people. Holy cow, I can win against these people where I thought, it was almost untouchable. And then you want to talk about hunger, Dave. You bring those kids to those meet and they get to see those lifters and see, like, especially the females, see like all these other strong females from around, or these other guys that thought they were, strong. And it should build a hunger in them where they're like, man, I want to place top 10 next year. Man, I want to make the podium. What's podium? It's top 5. Hey, that's what I got to do next year. Hey, I was so close. Hey, I can beat these guys. Hey, I'm in this weight class. I think I can do this. So I think seeing that, and I think when you get up to the college level too, holy cow, then again, you got 30, 40, some of these lifters per weight class, over 1,000 kids coming together. They're running a 5-platform meet 4 days in a row, morning, afternoon, evening sessions. And you see all these lifters, and it's like they're all under the same rules. They're all under the same 2-hour weigh, and they're all using the same bar and everything. There's no bitching. There's no complaining. I mean, there will be no matter what.
Yeah.
But seeing all this stuff, it really redefines a lot of people. I've seen it redefine more people, and more people get hungry from that than turn them away because they think, oh, wow, well, man, I finished this. Man, I think I can get this next year. I know I can get this. Or I know they'll get those rivalries. I know I can beat these kids. I know I can do this at this level with everything. So I think getting them in that organization, seeing that it's organized. I see all these different high school coaches I was on the high school coaching committee for a little bit for USA Powerlifting, and seeing how these coaches talk about that. And with the scholarships that are now available, Dave, a lot of the colleges are involved with, USAPL for the high school, or with collegiate nationals. So some of these kids are getting full rides at Midland University and McKendree University. Other ones are starting to pop up all over the place, and a lot of them are organized in that facility. So I've had a couple of my lifters, one got her full college paid for to go lift weights. I'm like, an athlete has to go there, lift weights, go to practice, go to film, everything else. You get to lift weights and go home, and you're going to get paid for, going to collegiate nationals, going to here. They helped her with IPF Worlds and everything too. I was like, this is just, it's just phenomenal. And I think people see that, the coaches get involved with it. They start to get to know each other. The kids get hungrier. They see that they can do better stuff on there. And it really just motivates people all the way through.
All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw to you the objections. Yeah. Right. We'll go back to our Bally sales training. Right. So I'm going to throw out
objections.
I'm going to throw out some of the objections here. All right. And you can tackle each one. Yeah. The first one would be those meets are like watching paint dry. Yeah. Right. So that's the first one. So how would you overcome that one?
I think it's getting better. And I think if you get Gino out there, who's been like a guy who's really gets the people hyped and gets them going with everything. I think when you go to a high school nationals or a collegiate nationals and you get those college kids going or anything, or if you go to the Arnold now and you've seen that, it's a complete change of what maybe was personified as before. So I think that has helped. And I think the announcers, I think the social media stuff has really helped those. So I think that while that stigma might still be there, I think it's completely changed. Because you go to college nationals, you can't, oh man, Louisiana, Lafayette, if I hear one more cowbell from that group over there, I mean, they are screaming, cheering. Guys are falling out of their seats just to get their lifters going. It's a last attempt. It's the place. I tell you what, when you see some of those atmospheres, especially when it comes down to deadlifts and everything, it's a completely change of mind from what maybe you thought it was.
Okay, so we'll keep the conversation collegiate and below. Okay. They're still taking drugs. They're just beating the test. Mm-hmm. So that would be the next objection.
Yeah. Well, I think what they're doing and what I had to go through too, which I think was great and why I chose them, is that when you get to the highest level, they will do a lot of random drug testing on you. And I was one of those that they came to my work and drug tested me. try explaining that to a principal who's an academic person. Like, I'm okay. They're just here for this. This is what I still do. I was still competing at the time. But I think when they were like actually going out and doing random drug testing, providing that material, like, and doing like water-approved, and there's all this, we won't even get into that. It's a whole nother topic on that. But I think at least at that level, the highest people are getting tested. At the meets, at least all the record holders, the placers, the winners, they're doing that, plus everybody else in between. So I'm sure that people can get away with stuff, but I think when the highest level lifters, especially in the U.S., are getting tested, and you can look that up and actually see that on the database where their stuff is getting sent in, I think that at least levels the playing field as much as it's going to be, because then they're going to get tested at the meets no matter what, because they're going to win, set records, do whatever. But now they're getting tested. You know, I've had one of my lifters, 4 times in the off season get tested here. I had another lifter 2 or 3 times in addition to all the meets that they're going to as well. So I think it levels off the playing field as best as you can do it.
All right. Well, there's also the first level of it. The perception is that, which is going to weed out a lot that we're just going to go to other federations because of that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I didn't go to ADFPA.
Yeah.
It's like, so just that perception that it's there is going to weed out a lot.
Yeah.
Right. Then the third would be the judging's bullshit.
I think it's some of the toughest judging around. All right. So I think that, and it's like any other federation.
Well, that's what I mean. So that context of bullshit would be the judging's too tough. Yeah. Where go ahead, continue.
No, I mean, it's very tough. And that's what I grew up in with everything like that. I mean, a below parallel squat's there, you know, a not locked out deadlift, they're not going to give you. Now, there's any other times when, you know, that was, you know, a bullshit call or something like that, and you got to go argue with the jury or something, or maybe somebody didn't give you a right call on that. That's going to happen in anything you go to. But I think it is the strictest. And like you said, when my kids go to that, it's when they've come back, they're like, man, this is, you know, they'll talk about, you know, the judging over here, like, hey, you legitimately have to have a squat. You legitimately have to pause on your bench press. There was no gimmies on there. Hey, that person actually had to lock it out. No, that wasn't locked out. They didn't give it to them. Hey, they made them hold that even longer at the top in that position. So I think it's as strict as it's going to be. I think when you're getting a young athlete involved, that's where you want to get them started. And that's where you want to go through, because I mean, you have to do those rules. I mean, there's no gimmies. I was at a meet recently and they were yelling about wrist wraps being too high and stuff like that. I was like, you got to give me a break on this. But I mean, they hold by their rules. They stick by their rules with everything like that. And they're going to charge you hard. But most of the time I've seen it where it's pretty fair. There's always some calls that are always questionable. And I've argued with the jury plenty of times with some of my lifters on stuff. Yeah. So, but I think it's going to be very, very hard. And the kids are going to learn the right way at the beginning.
Are there any that I'm forgetting? Anything? As far as the objections.
I don't know. You tell me from your end with stuff.
Well, I mean, that's basically what it all was. Yeah. You know, for me, it was kind of an easy decision because I wasn't drug free. So it just, that I didn't want to deal with that whole end. So it's just, here's where it is. And I came up through that other route. Right. Yeah. So I guess that would be an objection that I would find acceptable, because if that's the route and that's where you're going to get the help, it's somebody at a meet, and they're not going to help you if they go, you know, to one of the other meets, then you got to go where you're going to be able to have help, you know, for that meet. Yeah. But I still try to push, you know, in that direction there, which there's probably people now that are pissed. Yeah. I can't believe they've saying that, but you know, these are the reasons why I kind of presented what those reasons are. Yeah. Now, outside of that, as they mature as a lifter, there's a lot of choices. You know, go what best fits, you know, what you want to do and go that route. Yeah. It's just that route exists, and in some areas it's stifled, you know, for sometimes reasons that I don't think are valid. Yeah. You know, a couple of them I just brought up. Yeah. Like the judging, it's going to be way more strict, but for the most part, it's consistent across the board. Yep. You know, so if it's consistent across the board, that's the standard that they have, and that's what you just abide to. Yeah. Everybody else has to do it. It's a competitive event. So that one I really don't think needs to be part of that conversation. Yeah. The drug use part, I really don't think it needs to be part of the conversation if you're dealing with collegiate and under, because for the most part, are there going to be people? Yeah, I'm sure. Well,
Dave, even the IPF, I remember when I was going through, they kicked out the Russian Federation for 2 years for, you know, somebody failed drug tests, and the IPF was stuff where they couldn't even compete with everything. And you see a lot of us U.S. lifters. I mean, we would consistently go from our nationals and set PRs, and you would unfortunately see some stuff from Europeans where their totals would drop off when they got to the World Championships with everything. But I mean, they did a pretty good job as far as from my end with my top lifters and me, as far as doing the random tests and showing up at work, showing up at your job, you you know, showing up at home where you had to register, you know, where you're going to be at so they could test you with everything because you were at the top level. So at least they were doing a real good job with that on that part.
Well, at the same time, it really doesn't carry any weight if the lifter's trying to stay drug-free as long as they can, because if they go to another federation that's not tested, then the likelihood that they're going to compete against somebody that's on is greatly increased. It's not going to be less than, so see that argument kind of loses a little bit of its weight there. The boring meat, you know, that kind of loses its weight for a beginner lifter because they don't know any different.
Exactly.
You know, so they don't have that basis of comparison. Now, I could see if they've been doing gym meets and stuff like that, and that's kind of what most meets are still today. You know, we used to make fun of that, but now it's like standard practice to have meets in gyms. But they are way better. So I will, they're better gyms, it's better setups and all that. I could see that they go from that to the other one being different. You know, definitely being different.
I think though, once they do get exposed to the national level, you'll see a whole change of like, it's just an eye opener. It was an eye opener for me. It's an eye opener for any of my lifters that have never, you know, they've just done the local meets or anything. And then they're like, holy cow, this national thing, like, you know, the lights, the lasers, the backgrounds, like, holy cow, the people, the kids, the totals, how people are lifting out there. Like, it's an eye opener to a lot of people that normally have been like, wow, this is a whole nother level I didn't even know existed with that.
In maybe it's 2018 or 2019 at the Arnold, they had, you know, the USAPL had their meet going on, and then the XBC had their meet going on. And I remember seeing the difference, which was vast, you know, between the two. And then just thinking to myself, and I forget who I was with at the time, but I even, you know, I said, when I first came to the Arnold year and was still in high school when a coach brought me, and if I saw these two things, that is where I would have wanted to go. You know, 100%, you know, just the way it was set up, the crowd. It was not watching paint dry, let's just put it that way, not by any stretch of the imagination. Compared to the XBC, which was still good, you know, still, but that allure was not there, you know, 'cause I started where every meet was in a high school gym. I mean, that's just kind of how they all were.
That's how mine was growing up too. But I think it still comes down to the meet director. You'll see some meet directors nowadays that have like really done a really good job, and some that are still kind of, you know, quiet with their meets and everything. But you go to some of the bigger meets, or you go to around, you'll see some lifters now like, hey, they're like, you're in Illinois, why are you traveling all the way over for the Pennsylvania State Championships? Like, oh, it's the greatest meet. Like they'll bring out everything for all those people and get it going real good. So it's funny how you see the meet directors now, like you'll see lifters like traveling state over state just for a state meet because they want to go to where that meet director is or where they're holding it. So it sometimes depends on the meet and the meet director and who's holding it and what they got planned for them. Yes. And it's, I guess the other thing I can put out with that, if they come up through that as a teenager or a beginner lifter, then one of the issues that's always kind of been in the sport from the outside is, you know, a little bit of lack of respect for other federations, which has kind of gone away because all the federations have all had issues. But it used to be way worse if you go back to when you first started. There was a distinct difference with everything. It was a big difference to where it was a little bit less for me because I came up through the USPF, you know, so it was a little different. So I was able to say, you know, these are different, but then still have the respect for that. Where if they do go APF and, you know, other federations, which I promote that, you know, definitely promote multiply, all that other kind of stuff, but they're going to start raw anyhow. So they're going to start all through this. But I think if they go through that route, then they'll have mutual respect for all lifters across the board instead of what used to be. And it is way better. So it's way better. It's way better. Way better. And I want to see it continue like that. You know, I don't want to see it go back to how that was. Because yes, there's issues in powerlifting. There always has been, but it's way better between the respect of raw, multiply, single ply, all that across the board, 1,000%. And you would think it would be way worse because of social media, but in some
One of the best ways that you can support the podcast and your training is to join the crew. When you join the crew, you get an extra crew cast podcast every single month. You also get access to our Discord, which has a training Q&A with Team Elite FTS members. You get form checks. You can upload any of your training footage and have your lifts diagnosed, sometimes within minutes, by multiple people. Access to close to 30 different ebooks, training logs, and first sign up access to our weekly weekend training retreats, train your ass off, and other events that we do. Biggest takeaways from that though, what people enjoy the most and get the most out of is the training Q&A and the form checks, as well as the extra podcast. Hey guys, I'm back in the gym with another limited edition apparel drop. This is the new Live, Learn, Pass On shirt. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our cambered grip American cable attachment. This attachment has 4 grips and it's cambered. So when you flip it, it actually becomes 8 grips. And if you turn it upside down, there's actually 16. This is one of our most used cable attachments out in the gym. Even got that full range of motion. We got a second limited edition drop this month as well. Head over to elitefts.com, pick up the shirt, pick up the cable attachments, and we'll see you next time.
America Health is a premium telehealth platform specializing in hormone optimization and preventative medicine. Are you looking to optimize your health in and out of the gym, improve recovery, sex drive, and quality of life? Have you tried speaking to your health professional about this and have gotten the cold shoulder, stereotyped, or just told it's part of getting older? You just go to americahealth.com/table talk, and you can create your own lab, or you can take labs that we've had set up for them, which are based upon the same labs that I've been doing over the last 15 years. Or you can use their guided optimization. With this, they'll put you in touch with a patient care coordinator, which is actually pretty cool because you get to sit down and speak to somebody that can understand what you're looking for from hormone optimization and the preventative medicine standpoint. After that conversation, they'll determine which labs that you should and which tests you should have done, and then from there, get the labs done. They'll review those labs with you and put you in touch with one of their hormone optimization specialists that can determine which supplementation that you should use over the counter or prescription. americahealth.com/table talk. The discount code is table talk.